We're back for our visit, our annual visit to peat and peaty whiskies. It's time for the vPub Peatfest session. But recently in Scotland, the weather's been really bright. It's been springtime every day, gorgeous sunshine, blue skies, all of that stuff. And I realised maybe I've left it just a wee bit too late for the Northern Hemisphere, at least this year. But no, Scotland has done us proud once more, and the rain came down, and how today. It's put me right back in the mood for peaty whiskies. I hope you're in the mood for it too, because I've got a nice lineup to share with you. At least I hope they're going to be nice. Most of them are uncorkings. And I'm looking forward to it as I always do. It's time to get our peat head on, our peat face on. It's time to get some peaty whiskey in the glass and enjoy it tonight. I'm looking forward to it. Hope you are all too. And I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the vPub. Welcome to another Thursday night. As I said in the intro there, I'd left the Peatfest session, kind of like the idea of doing it annually. When you think about just how much Scotch whiskey relies on peat smoke, peat flavours. When we talk about peat, it's inextricably linked with smoke, of course. When we talk about that smoky element, it's really, really strongly associated with Scotch. Not all Scotches are smoky, of course, and not all smoky whiskies are Scotch, especially in these days in 2025. But, if you were to talk about a smoky whiskey, you would probably 9 times out of 10 be speaking about Scotch whiskey. So it's a bit of a surprise that we only dedicate one vPub a year to peaty whiskies. Throughout the year, peaty whiskies, smoky whiskies are going to be sprinkled throughout the content, of course. But I think it's nice to ring fence one vPub session and round about this time of year, before the warmer weather kicks in, I suppose, and just to celebrate that thing that is peaty, smoky whiskies. We started out in 2022, and we just had a kind of general peat session, and we brought in people from the community and things like that to talk about peaty whiskies. Then in 2023, we did a session on world peat. Where did they get the peat from? Why are they doing peaty whiskies wherever they are? All of these type of things. We didn't really focus on Scotch at all. And then in 2020, I think that was, am I 1 year out, 2022? That was 2023, yeah. Last year is 2024. We're in 2025 already, aren't we? Last year in 2024, we covered just Islay distilleries, and we managed to get round the island of Islay quite well. This time I've decided to bring it back onto the mainland to talk about a Highland peaty styles of whiskey. And it's a wee bit difficult in 2025 because there are far too many distilleries. Virtually none of them are making whiskey today the same way that they have in their past, and as part of their history, everything's changed these days. And I think that's what we're going to focus on tonight, how that has changed and what it means for us as whiskey drinkers who enjoy peaty whiskies in 2025. I'm going to kind of start in the south of the Highlands, and I'm going to start in a kind of, let's say, a budget price range, an accessible price point. Then I'm going to move right up to the north and go to the other extreme of the price categories, unobtainium almost, and talk about different ways to get peat into whiskey and peat flavours into whiskey. Then we're going to bring it back south again. We're going to move out southeast and go over to the east of the Highlands. The Highlands is just such a vast area in terms of scale, right? It would be clumsy if we tried to kind of clump it together and consider it one kind of category. But we're just going to stay inside that boundary tonight and go all over the Highlands. We'll go into the southeast and we'll look at a couple of distilleries actively producing peated and unpeated spirit alongside each other. And then we'll go right across to the west coast. Okay, I'm in mirrors. From your perspective, the west coast, just about as extreme as you can get on the west coast mainland to look at a particularly peaty whiskey from there. As I say, most of the bottles tonight will be uncorking, so the usual caveats apply. I'm not reviewing whiskies here. I'm just opening them, talking about them, sharing them with you, giving you my first impressions and that type of thing. I always recommend anybody when they're opening a whiskey to give it a wee bit of a time. Not just because of how the whiskey might change with a wee bit of air in a bottle, might stretch, might settle a little bit, all of these things, but we adapt to the whiskey too. The neck pour is a thing for me. It's not a thing for everyone, but for me it really is. And I can often find that when I go to a whiskey for the first time, it gives me a kind of good indication, and the majority of the time that kind of stays pretty stable. But I've been surprised in the past of how much whiskey can change after it's been open for a wee while, by the time you're 2 or 3 drams in. Anyway, that's the plan for tonight. We're just going to meander. Normally I get time to put a lot of prep into the vPub, but I'll be honest with you right up front. It's just going to be me, 50% of tonight is going to be me winging it, because it's been a very, very busy week with lots of things on the go, not least in the last few days we've been managing the Daftmill release, which is now available to all patrons. It went out on Tuesday to evangelists, it went out on Wednesday yesterday to disciples, and today it went out to all the rest of my patrons. Thank you all so much for your support. I often talk about how little I actually do for you, you know, how little I pay back my patrons. So when I got the opportunity to do something for you, I try and do it, and that's why you got priority this time. Thank you for your support. Thank you so much. The reason that all of the projects I get involved in exist, make no mistake, is because of the support I get from Patreon. It's gone very, very well. There's been some hiccups. Obviously, when you're trying to send an individual code to each individual person, there's going to be potential there for hiccups, but we've managed to pick them up. I've been working, picking up your messages and your emails and things and working through them with you individually. Fortunately, the ratio of hiccups versus everything going smoothly is very, very small. The majority of you, 9.5 out of 10 of you, have had no hitch at all. Maybe even higher proportion than that you've been absolutely fine with it. But some of the emails have ended up in spam folders, and some of the refreshes happened on the website, and it looks like the code's been tried to use twice and all of this stuff. We'll get there. Don't worry about it. Everybody's sorted so far. As I come live to you tonight, nobody's having any problems with their Daftmill. In fact, some of you are so excited about it that you may even have it in the glass tonight, because some of it has already been delivered. Let me know how you're getting on with it. I'm super confident you're going to love it. I've been able to share it with a lot of people. The Glasgow Whisky Club, I was able to share it with on our trip to Fife. I was able to share it in a tasting in in Edinburgh a couple of weekends ago with a bunch of barflies in the Belfry. 40 of us managed to rinse a bottle together. It went down very, very well. I would love to hear your feedback on it. I'm sure Francis would too, and everybody in the community in general. For those of you that this was a wee bit out of your price range for this release this time, I completely understand that. I get it. Daftmill is pretty rare and expensive at the best of times. But when it's a 15-year-old product, wouldn't you know, the one I pick is one of the most precious, right? It's an even higher kind of price point. That said, a lot of you have pushed the boat out for this because you realise that it is quite a special thing, a special bottle. A lot of you don't even see a Daftmill. You've never held a Daftmill. You've never tasted a Daftmill, perhaps. So it's a real opportunity for you to get your hands on it. For everybody that has stepped forward, I would really love to hear your feedback on the whiskey. Know that the future releases that I'm working on actively right now, in fact, there's one on the desk. I don't want to give too much away. I'll just let you have a wee sneak peek at that. The ones I'm working on right now, I'm just every bit as excited about. So there will be things following in the future. Not very often. These things take time. It's not part of my kind of business model. It's not how I make money or whatever. These are dressing projects. These are just kind of nice things to do, collaborative wee projects. But there's quite a few on the go just now, and each of them will come when they are ready, when they're good to go, not before. And I'll let everybody know in advance what they're going to be. I'm excited about those two. Anyway, enough chitty chat of the preamble. Let's do what we always do of a Thursday evening. Let's jump into the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Cheers, everyone. Welcome. Peaty, smoky whiskey in the glass tonight. Let me know what you guys have got in the glass. How are you getting on? I just want to say welcome to a couple of barflies who've just joined tonight. There's one I can't read out. It looks a wee bit like, I don't know what those characters are, so I'm not even going to guess. I was going to guess there. But somebody has stepped forward to keep the vPub absolutely ad-free, and also Asai Borg has also joined the Aquaviti Barflies to help keep it ad-free as well. There's people who have chosen to join the YouTube membership. It's $1.99 a month of whatever your currency is. But what it means is that $1.99, I never need to go to Google for ad revenue. So you don't need to sit through ads before, after, or in between watching the vPub session. And I think that's important, especially when it's such long form content. It's like a podcast, right? And there's nothing worse than listening to your favorite podcast and just constantly being sold stuff. I don't like it. I prefer to do it differently. I prefer to use the community. Thank you so much for stepping forward. Like Finally Done, who's here tonight celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 15 months. He's already earned his wee gold Barfly, and he's saying peaty whiskey's good for a milestone. Thank you very much for your support, Finally Done, and welcome to the Barflies. Thank you for supporting for 15 months. All right, let's see how you're getting on. Gerben in the Netherlands, good to see you, buddy. Good to see you, he's saying. What a great day. So looking forward to the Daftmill, which might arrive on Monday. Fingers crossed, Gerben. Like I say, let me know what you think of it when you finally get it open. Jenny Miller is saying, good evening, Roy. Going to be a replay for me this week. Jerry, no problem, my friend. I appreciate you watching live. I appreciate you picking up on the replay too. If you're back watching on the replay now, welcome back, Jerry. I hope you're doing well. Gino Kimo is saying, hey, Roy, looking forward to this peaty vPub. Nice to see you, buddy. A nice Kilkerran, 16 in the glass. Starting with just a wee bit of peat there, Gino. I hope it's going down well, buddy. Nice to have you joining us from Canada. Max Kreitner is saying, Aquaviti, good evening, my friend. Favourite evening of the week. And a Ballechin 15-year-old is poured. You might hear that name Ballechin appearing. We don't know if it's Ballechin or Ballechin. I believe it to be Ballechin. But if you say Ballechin or Ballechin or whatever you want to say, it's fine, isn't it? We can't get uptight about pronunciation. I know a lot of people want to know the real way to pronounce it or the way that they should pronounce it. That's important to folk, I know, but I believe it to be Ballechin. There you go. That's from Andrew Symington, at least himself. Danny Hebington is here. Good to see you as always, Danny. He's saying it's not peat in the glass just now, but it's a wonderful 15-year-old double single. He's starting on the Daftmill. He's already in. Well, he's used the word wonderful. Let's see if we can get any expansion on that. Danny, I hope you're enjoying it, buddy. Ginger Genius is saying, good evening, Roy, and all the barflies. Good to have you in, John. How you keeping? I hope you're doing well, fella. Nice to welcome you in here on another Thursday night. Major Nut is saying, evening, all barflies, Aquaviti and other whiskey botherers. A smoking vPub tonight. Have to catch most of it on the replay, though. He's given me a wee cheers as well. Major Nut, thank you very much for picking this up on the replay. Thanks for coming in to say hello before you do so, buddy. Nice to have you. Whiskey Games is saying only 2 weeks to go until I dip my toe in Islay Peat. My heart will always be in the far northern Highlands, though, and the heathery peat. Oh, interesting that you're leaning on quite a difference there. You know, last year we went to Islay for the Peatfest. This year we're in the Highlands. So you're already making that distinction, Matthew. But you're looking forward. Does that suggest it's your first trip to Islay then in a couple of weeks' time? It's emotional. You're going to enjoy it. MJ Rodden is saying, Aquaviti and fellow peat flies. I'm ganting for Peatfest, starting off with a lowland peat lag Oloroso. Oh, that's a good pick as well. Lag Oloroso, not just a lowland, but the only island lowlander that exists. One I enjoy too, MJ. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope it's going down well. Mike Molasses saying, good evening, Roy. Good to see you, Mike. Black Fen, good to see you, Conrad. He's saying, my bottle of Daftmill arrived this afternoon. I wonder if that means you'll be opening it, buddy. I'm nervous and I'm confident at the same time. Does that make sense at all? There's no way any whiskey can be perfect for everyone. I think that the effort that we put into that particular bottle that's going out right now is probably the most effort that's ever gone in. I don't know. We worked really hard on the Ardnamurchan releases as well. However, it's just fantastic for me. It's wonderful. And it would be nice to hear other people are enjoying it too. Alice saying, evening, Roy. Good to have you. Alan Hellswood is saying it's on its way, whoopee. Fantastic, Helen. It'll be with you, hopefully, for the weekend. Jimmy Legg is in. Good to see you, Jimmy. And George Ellis saying, hello, Roy. The boys from Arizona are in. Scott Allen and Tom Whiskey and Wine Trail. So we've got a trilogy of the Arizona boys in tonight. We've got George, Tom and Scott, fantastic to have you. We just need our pal Drew from Arizona to make it a quartet. Mike Molasses saying, ordered my bottle. Hopefully it arrives by my birthday in June. Oh, I think you'll be no problem there. Royal Mail Whiskies have been really, really good at supporting in the past, getting the stuff out there, all corners of the world. So I think you can be pretty confident about that, buddy. Scott Matheson saying, got the Daftmill today, but leaving it until the next lock-in. Oh, I wonder if the next lock-in that we do will be an April lock-in, won't it? So that would mean that a Sunday night, patrons getting together, and it might be nice for me to, instead of sitting there sipping the Daftmill and Mo and inviting all of you guys, just those of you who are interested in opening your bottle, of course. I'm not going to bully anyone into opening it. Maybe do a wee sip-along session. Maybe do a wee thing and trying to see if we get much commonality in the tasting notes. Hi, Roy. Jimmy Leg is saying, you look very handsome tonight. Well, okay, let that be the last of the positivity from Jimmy tonight. We need you to be your usual cheeky, humorous self, Jimmy. I hope you're keeping very well, and I hope Angie is too, buddy. Thanks for the compliment to start with, even although I know you're talking out of your other end. Sam Pritchard is saying, got the Daftmill neck pour in my glass just now. Just having a wee rest before it gets tasted. I think it's especially important, Sam, if it's just been delivered today. Bottle shock isn't a thing to everything all of the time, but in my experience, bottle shock is a thing. Whiskey can be a wee bit, it's probably best practice to leave it sitting to rest for a wee bit. Good for you, Sam. I wonder how you're going to get on with it. Oops, big jump. Wow, big jump. I was a wee bit behind there. Let's just try and catch up. I'm sorry, I'm going to miss so many of you. Make a Dram Decision, Ian Williamson, Gordon Burniston. Gordon, terrific photos from the Indie Festival last weekend. I've absolutely loved looking at them. There's a great article went out today on Dramface, actually, by Ainsley, recalling his trip to the Indie Festival. It looks like it's not a bottle review. It is actually a bottle review, but he talks about the festival as well. Wonderful, made me really nostalgic for it. I know it was only 2 weeks ago. Just a great summary and lots and lots of great pictures, no least thanks to you, Gordon. Christoph is here, Jimmy Jazz as well. Bruce Bernard celebrating being a barfly for 37 months, saying, been here a bit longer than that. Indeed you have, Bruce. It's wonderful to have your support, buddy. Going to scroll down to the bottom a bit. Tobias, I'm missing you. Chris Key, sorry, Chris Harrow, weekend, Whiskey Weekend Dram. You've been missing a lot of chat. It's getting busy, isn't it? And it's just the chat that takes a big jump, and I miss so much. Helen is saying, here's a Gaelic pronunciation for you, Roy. Lindo Ashlingen. I don't know what that means. Are you trying to be cheeky, potentially, Helen? If I know you, I bet I've just slipped on a banana skin, haven't I? Hello, wonderful barflies, and good evening, says Luna Aaron. Fantastic to have you in, Luna. Another Canadian in, Graham Young as well. And where's Roy in Norway saying, good evening, Roy Aquaviti. First whiskey of the evening, and the only peated Highland whiskey open at the moment. Single cask, Inchmoan, old bottle. Newer Inchmoans are better. Oh my good grief, Roy. It's every week it's like you're in my head. And I don't just mean you specifically, Roy. Wonderful to see you in Edinburgh recently as well. You and your partner. It was great to have you both. In the glass tonight, I've started in the Southern Highlands. I've started with a kind of budget entry-level peaty whiskey that doesn't get a lot of coverage on the vPub. And it is, as Roy has just pointed out, it's a bottle of Loch Lomond 12-year-old. But specifically, this is the Inchmoan expression, which is their peaty expression, and they call it smoke and spice. Aged 12 years, 46% ABV. This has appeared on the vPub before. This is not an uncorking. This is what's in the glass. I'm just going to add a wee bit more to this small pour that I've got in front of me, just to give me a wee bit more for a very specific reason that Roy has already uncovered. Because the opener for tonight is for me to go and revisit Loch Lomond's Inchmoan 12-year-old. How did you know, Roy? How did you know? Now, of course, he's going to have a different expression from me. It looks like he's potentially got a single cask or something. This is the official bottling. £34 I paid for this. That was on offer. It's typically about $38.40. Picked up an offer for £34, 46% ABV and non-chill filtered. It says so on the label, I believe, somewhere. Yes, it does. It says non-chill filtered right each side of the Stag's Head logo there. Great stuff. I do hope that Loch Lomond have the courage one day, with the additional quality that's coming from their liquid in terms of distillation and maturation, means that at some point in the future they're not going to be tempted to add any colouring in the future. But the standard 12-year-old range from Loch Lomond currently has colour added. Not all of the releases from Loch Lomond do. The Steam and Fire non-age statement release is fully natural. All of their distillery edition releases, of which they're up to about 7 releases now, fabulous stuff. Very good value too. All of that is completely natural. But why have I picked up a bottle of Inchmore 12-year-old when I already have a bottle of Inchmore 12-year-old on the go and only half empty? Well, I'm a bit of a maniac. I'm a whiskey maniac. I'm a whiskey botherer. I'm curious. And of course, of what I do, I wouldn't expect you guys to be picking up bottles before you're finished the previous bottle, just because it's a newer edition or a different branding set. These are both Loch Lomond Inchmore, and they've kept the colour the same, but the branding is quite a bit different. It's gone from a tall, round, kind of very narrow style to slightly more chunky, dumpy style. I think the new style is a bit more premium, a bit more heft about it, a much nicer cork, and just a better bottle to hold and appreciate. But what I'm really interested in, what I really want to get to know about this comparison tonight, is Roy has already touched upon. I have a suspicion, not least because of the master distiller Michael Henry, potentially the entire team there, and their focus on building the quality of Loch Lomond over the last decade, 2 decades, at least the last 15 years. We should start to see continual improvements coming out on the released products from Loch Lomond. In my experience, that's absolutely consistent. That is true, but maybe we get a wee chance to do this side by side tonight. I've obviously been interested in it enough to use it in a blind session. You can see there's a blue dot on this. That means sometime in the past, I've used this in a blind lineup. It might not have been an online session with you guys. It might have been something that I've done privately here or whatever. But this has been used for some kind of comparison project in the past. But I suspect what I've used this for in the past is because it's really, this is the old one I'm nosing right now. It's really quite a unique peated whiskey. It's from the Southern Highlands. It's peated. Obviously, we're going to talk about where the peat comes from and everything like that in a second, because that can be a blanket discussion about all of the whiskies I'm sipping tonight, unfortunately. This is specifically a different take on Loch Lomond. So they're taking their standard spirit. Yes, it's going to be potentially more from the Swan neck stills rather than the straight neck stills. They're going to kind of be changing those cut points to go into the maybe the feints or maybe the foreshots a little bit heavier in order to get a bit more weight or body or character to the spirit. But this Inchmore to me has always been a little bit of a challenging whiskey. It's not an easy one to recommend because on top of all of these quite dense, ripe, rich fruits, and a lot of citrus too, a lot of kind of candied orange and grapefruit. I always get grapefruit from Loch Lomond. There's also a whole raft of workshop, kind of sour meat and sweat type notes, a little bit of kind of shoe polish, a little bit of a rubber note. All of these things, you might think with those notes I'm talking about a Ben Nevis or maybe sometimes a Ben Romack or something like that. But no, I'm in the Southern Highlands and I'm very much talking about Loch Lomond. Bruised apple as well. There's some quite challenging elements to this that might make it a little bit difficult for beginners. Some caramelized sugar now, some kind of almost kind of a treacle toffee or overly caramelized, slightly singed, burnt toffee notes. Very interesting, very characterful. But I suspect that I might see a wee bit of a change in this much more modern expression of Loch Lomond 12 Inchmore. But I'm not going to go in looking for that. I'm going to just try and just going as open as I possibly can. And if I get the exact same experience, then it's a good thing for consistency from them. If I get something that's much easier, much sweeter, or something maybe a wee bit more challenging, who knows? That's the idea. So I've just uncorked that tonight. We'll leave it in the glass for a wee minute. I just had to pause there and go through that whole thing because it's uncanny that Roy was able to predict it like so many of you do every week. Lachlan Mackenzie's celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 7 months. Evening, folks. Good to have you in, Lachlan. Thank you for your support, buddy. George P has gifted 10 Aquavita memberships out there to 10 random Barflies that are joining tonight. Fantastic. I hope you stay and come along for the ride. George P, thank you very much for your generosity, my friend. It's a pleasure to have folk like you in looking after the other Barflies too. And Kiwi Igor is saying, sorry, it's Kiwi Igor, it's Kiwi Igor, isn't it? Or Kiwi Igor? It's Igor, isn't it? Anyway, he's celebrating being a member for 35 months. He's already on his pink Barfly. Cheers, everyone. We'll catch the replay. Ciao. Fantastic to have had you in to say hello, Kiwi Igor. Igor, sorry. And I hope you're enjoying the replay now that you're back again. And JJR has just signed up and joined the Aquavita Barflies. JJR, thank you very, very much for joining, my friend. Where was I? I was at Roy, but I'm not going to be able to scroll all the way back up to Roy. The chat is moving pretty quickly. No, in all seriousness, Aquavita, says Helen, it's the name for our new house. In English, it's Follow Your Dreams. What a fantastic name. So you've already worked out what I would suggest, I hope you've asked a Gaelic-speaking local to do the translation and you haven't just plugged it into Google. You'll get the opportunity to ask. And if you're going to the Kintyre Peninsula, I suspect that you might want to try and figure out what the dialect of Gaelic would have been down that way as well. But congratulations to you all. I can't wait to see and hear all about your new adventures. Helen and Andy, all the best. Cheers. David in Portugal is saying, excited for this one? Let it be smoky. Let it be filthy. Let it be sooty. Let it be so pungent that it'll make neighbours call the emergency services, lol. I'll be honest with you. When I come down in the morning, it doesn't matter how good I've been at kind of tidying up and housekeeping after I shut the vPub down of an evening or of a Thursday. After the Peatfest session, you come in the morning and the room is smelling absolutely fantastic. Billy Bennett 75. That looks like a new name, Billy. He's saying, ordered a Daftmill today, my first purchase from outside Norway. So pretty excited. Fantastic, Billy. Thank you for your support as a patron. It's nice to welcome you in here. I hope you love it when it lands with you. Aaron as well is here. He's saying, have a dram of the SMWS and Shimon in the glass too. Fantastic, Aaron. You're on theme tonight as well, not just with a smoky Loch Lomond, but exactly the spirit that I've got in the glass in front of me as well as Royal Vimir in Norway. A grain of malt is in Sweden. Good to see you, James. He's saying, good evening, Aquavita, and howdy, Barflies. Wonderful to welcome you in, buddy. I hope you're doing well. Gary Field is celebrating being a member for the Barflies for a month. He's wee green Barfly, and he's saying, my Daftmill is arriving tomorrow, and I am excited. Fantastic. Whisky Weekend Drama is saying, going to pour a great peated Jura from Milroy's. Did you taste it? I've never tasted that one, Harrow. Not to my memory, at least. There are very good Juras out there. Michael Wood is saying, Roy Aquavita, hope you will have Old Ballechin to review tonight. Michael, it was in the lineup. I've got the Old Ballechin 15 on the shelf, but I remember I used it for a vPub. I did a wee search, couldn't figure out when that vPub was, but I think it's at least a couple of years ago. In the end, because I've got 5 other whiskies to get through tonight, it was shelved. There will be no peated Tom and Towel later, Michael. Maybe on another vPub in the future. Neverwind is saying, considering how many countries are making single malt whiskey now, is peated whiskey the Scotch hallmark unique to Scotland? Well, I have to say that I think it still is our thing. It does exist a wee bit in Ireland. Peat exists right across the planet. You know, it's not, and it's been a fuel source right across the planet, not exclusively to Scotland. But you know that, you know, when Scotch production came together before electricity, before steam, before even oil and things like that, you know, peat was the fuel source. So it made its way into the spirit in a way that wasn't designed. It was originally quite an incidental thing. And it became so synonymous with Scotch whisky. And I don't think that that's going to shift anytime soon. There's pressure on sustainability and things like that, and you're essentially cutting up a carbon sink and burning it. So that there is, look, there's lots of ways that we cut up that carbon sink and use it. I suspect that, and I hope that Scotch whisky production remains a small proportion of that. But there's no doubt in recent years that the demand for peat in order to produce peaty whisky and how popular that peaty smoky whisky has become is an issue. However, I do believe that it is inextricably synonymous with Scotch whisky production. A lot of people that don't really know whisky or like whisky, as soon as they hear the word Scotch, they associate it with smoke and smoky whisky, maybe down to blends and things like that. But yeah, I think it is Scotch. Doodle Dram is saying, I'm revisiting Old Ballechin tonight, and it's mad how unique it is amongst peated whiskies. Allegedly, truly Speyside harvested peat. It's like Winnie Pooh's house burned down. So sweet. What a way to describe it, Arnie. Can I just mention that it was so cool to be able to see Chris Everwind in the flesh? We were on a Zoom call with the Scotch for Dummies a week or so ago. It was really, really nice, Chris, to see you there. And it was really nice to hang out with Arnie Doodle the Dram at the Whisky Club, Glasgow Whisky Club, on Monday night this week. Great to hang out with you, Arnie. Pedro is in from Brazil and saying, good evening, Barflies and Aquaviti. Ginger Genius is saying Aquaviti, starting with a signatory Ardmore 12-year-old after Islay casks. It's really nice. I like the theme. Stay on that. Think about that theme, although I won't have an Ardmore a wee bit later tonight. John, I hope you're enjoying it. Anyway, let's go on. This has had its time, isn't it? This is the original one. Like I say, lots of those kind of workshop, oily rag type themed notes. I keep leaning on the kind of shoe polish thing. And it's an almost waxy thing, an orange peel, waxy solvent type orange oil type mix. And the reason I get it is when you crack open one of those little tins of waxy shoe polish, you get that kind of that and it's waxy, but it's kind of solventy, it's chemically, it's oily. But there's also quite a sweet, welcoming aroma that comes from that polish, right? Especially when you're using it. And it's just a wee bit reminiscent of that. Now that I'm nosing it and thinking, the subconscious, there's a bit of leaf mulch and things going on. So you know, rather than this hanging on the specific notes that I'm sharing with you, you know the general pool of notes that I'm in with this one, and you can probably get a sense of what this Inchmoan from Loch Lomond is about. And I would suggest it's quite a unique whiskey. If I was to pick something else from my shelves that was close to this, I don't know what I'd be picking up. Maybe a Ben Nevis, which would maybe have a bit more spice about it, I think. Maybe a peaty Ardnamurchans. I don't know. It would be tough to find something. I think it is really quite a unique spirit. Anyway, this is the old one. And I'm going to guess this is probably about a 5-year-old bottling now, maybe a 2020 release, something like that. There's perhaps a bottle code on here that I could look for if my eyesight was better, but it's probably an unreadable code. There is a number on here. It's an L number. There's some numbers underneath it, but I can't really pick it out. I'm going to guess that this has been bottled about 5 or so years ago. Then about 3 years ago, they went into the new livery here. So this is a much more recent bottling, and I've just picked up this bottle this week for this very purpose. It's brand new. I just purchased this one. Big difference. Wow. Not expecting that at all. Not expecting that change. Wow. Okay. Right, this is just so much easier to get your face right in and just soak and just... This is much cleaner. This is all citrus, sweet citrus, clementine. Their smoke here is giving us a kind of sense of a charred citrus rind. But I would even say the smoke is quieter. Smoke's much more obvious on this one because the other notes behind it kind of draw you towards the smokier end of the spectrum. They draw you towards a more kind of more challenging, more kind of aromatic, robust notes. This one, this is a fruit basket. This is sweet. There's even a wee tropical edge. It's almost like a fruit salad, a tinned fruit salad. Syrupy, clean sweetness to it. So all of that kind of solvent and wax and oil and grunge type thing has been cleaned up. I suspect that if I was to nose this alongside something that was very, very fresh and clean and bright, then it would nose still a wee bit like that, but not against the older one. I hope they don't go too far, too clean. I would like to some character to remain, some of the kind of more challenging, interesting side. I don't want it to be too sanitized. So what I might do is just keep these in the glass and then see how we go on tonight and come back to them a wee bit later. This is like tinned fruit salad, sweet citrus. Even the grapefruit thing that I look for in Loch Lomond is a wee bit quieter. Like I say, neck pour. Wee bit of a malty, a caramel biscuit type. Like what are those biscuits called? Caramelized biscuits. Is it biscotti? If I just made that up. And this one, the older one. Oh no, that's got the same biscuit note as well. But this is just so much cleaner. Okay, let's have a wee sip on this. Cheers, everyone. Okay, now on the palate, there is a wee bit of that sourness, of that bitterness, the kind of grapefruit thing. It's there. It's not nearly as sweet as the nose suggested it was going to be. There's lots of wood spice here too. Oh, this is good for a very approachable entry-level whiskey. There's lots here. What you think is going to be pretty straightforward, there's a wee bit more to it. Why do I get so excited about all this stuff? What I once witnessed as being pretentious, right? People just sipping whiskey and just shouting notes. I thought it was ridiculous. But it's the desire to articulate the experience, because when you're sipping neat spirits at this strength, 46% ABVs in this specific case, it's doing things to all your primary senses. Texture, what you nose, what you smell, the aromas, the flavors. And because they're flashing and flickering, what you're trying to do is label them as they pass. That it's part of the love, it's part of the thing that you just enjoy. And I suspect because there's going to be another 4 bottles to uncork and share with you tonight, there might be a lot of that tonight. So if it's the kind of thing that switches you off and you don't like to witness it, just kind of try and tune out a wee bit while I'm doing that kind of thing. I get it, I understand it completely. But we are very remote. You're sitting in various corners of the planet right now. And I'm just trying to label these flavors to get across to you what I'm experiencing. And you can decide whether it might be a whiskey that you'd be interested in. My initial reaction here, to me and to anybody who cares, whether you're a beginner or whether you're quite an experienced, I think I could put these things down in front of you. Okay, I'm going to change what I was just about to say. You would taste the difference. Absolutely, you would taste the difference. You would smell the difference. You would sense the difference. But I also would suggest that you would also pick up some DNA, some similarities. So citrusy, to the point that the newer one is bringing out sweeter, fresher, citrusy things, and the older, funkier version. I can't smell past shoe polish on this. It's crazy, I know. And it's not a bad thing. It's shoe polish in a good way. Just the wee Springbanky sense to that one too, there. The tinned fruit, the syrup thing is there. Fresher, brighter, cleaner, slightly sharper. But I think very much still Loch Lomond. I'm not sure I would pick it out blind, but if you gave me a narrow field of choices to pick from, I think I would pick it out fairly reliably. Well, about as reliably as I can get, let's put it that way. I have to say, for £34, the price I paid for that, you might have to pay £38.40, as I say, for the Loch Lomond 12-year-old. They've got the original, which is ever so slightly peaty, just a wee tiny bit of seasoned smoke in it. They've got the Inchmurrin, which is from the straight neck pot stills, super fruity, elegant, light. One of my favourites, actually, from the Loch Lomond range. And then you've got this peated version. They're all 46% ABV and non-chill filtered, and they're all great value. So they're a nice selection to dip in and check in on from time to time. What I wanted to do is just see how much of a change there's been over the years. That change might not be necessarily permanent. Malt whiskey is a pretty fickle thing, and it doesn't really like to be consistent. It's a fairly inconsistent thing to make in a batch made process, with lots of things feeding into its potential inconsistency, and then you take the final spirit that you've tried to make as consistent as you possibly can, if that's your goal, and then you put it into an organic vessel that holds a couple of 100 litres. And if you're putting thousands and thousands of litres into these vessels, then each and every oak cask, every one of those vessels is going to be very different. So there is flavour drift naturally in Scotch malt whisky, and I think it should be embraced. I think when we see distilleries that have improved vastly over a fairly concentrated period of time, as is the case with Loch Lomond, I think it's nice from an enthusiast, from a geeky perspective, to try and track that. And then if we're going to pick up bottles, especially if we're going to surf the secondary market, and we're kind of going to want to pick up an extra bottle to make our box of 6 or something for our shipping, whatever it is, and we can see an old example bottle of an Inchmurrin or something like that, and that's more to our style, it's good to be aware of that flavour drift, of those things that change over time. If I was to pick a favourite between the two, you wouldn't get an answer from me. They're different enough for me not to be able to do that easily. The newer one is much easier to recommend. This is a bit more challenging, the older one. I think if you were to offer me 2 full bottles tonight and take one away, the Moonawin tonight, I would take away the older one, just because of how characterful it is, and just because I want to put it in front of people and say, here, can you taste shoe polish in this? I can't really taste shoe polish. I can nose it, something that reminds me personally of shoe polish. Anyway, lots of other things to get through tonight. Pop that off to the side. The Barfly top, there we go, is the new one, and the Aquavitae logo is the old one, so I can keep a tab on that and try them a wee bit later. What say you? What are you sipping and getting along with? Where's Roy saying my bottle is bottled in 2019, very raw and unbalanced, Roy? Is that unbalanced in a good way? And also the age 2019, that might be going back to a point in time where things were a little bit more inconsistent from the distillate at Loch Lomond, but also maybe the wood policy and things has come a long way since then. Jimmy Legg is saying biscuits are rarely caramelised, Aquavitae, unless biscuit means onions in Scotland. No, I'm speaking about, it's not the biscuit itself, but I think it's the sugar that they make the biscuit with. There's somehow, I don't know about the process of baking these, but it's a red packet with white, and the flavour is a kind of caramelised sugar flavour, but it is a biscuit. And if Italian coffee shops, especially here, you often have them served on the side, but they're very, very popular. Biscoff, grain of malt is nailed it. Biscotti, I said, didn't I? Biscoff is the brand. There you go. Thank you, James. They're served on the side in coffee shops here. Dave the Brave is saying, good evening. I'm finishing my Springbank 10 Amontillado Dram, joining tonight's theme after that. I hope the Springer is going down well, Dave, and fantastic. Well, there's a wee bit of smoke in that, right? And it's fantastic. You're going to be jumping on the smoke train in a wee bit. And Christoph is saying there is a Franconian tradition of making smoky beer by drying the malted barley over wood smoke. I wonder if that exists in whiskey too. Not wood smoke. Interestingly, Blacksmith and Jones, Greg and Guy, the guys behind the Independent Spirits docu-series that was premiered at Leith for the alongside the Independent Spirits Festival a couple of weeks ago. They are, am I telling tales out of school? Should I not say anything about that? Let's just say there's a connection between Franconian beer and those guys. Keep your eye on Blacksmith and Jones for the future, just in case anything should come of that. But super interesting, Christoph. Thank you. Excuse me. Luna is saying, narrow choice of whiskies. So you mean more than two? I know, that's right. I hear you. Good point, Luna. And Grainer Malt is saying Biscoff, and Al is saying Biscoff. Absolutely. I made a mess of it. I said Biscotti is a thing, right? But I was being middle-aged and I got it wrong. Biscoff is absolutely right. David is saying one of the best non-Islay peated is the Glen Dornock, traditionally peated at 48%, not earthy, and leaf mold and petrichor. So I suspect that we might get a wee bit of those notes coming out tonight, because I get exactly what you're talking about. Ardmore can be quite a good example of that in my experience, depending on especially the cask that it's been in, to either harness that or mute that. But I get exactly what you're talking about. On that Loch Lomond, for example, not immediately, but when I went in a wee bit later, I got a bit of that kind of leaf, you're saying leaf mold, leaf mulch, that autumnal wet leaves thing when the leaves are start to kind of just naturally decay and you get that kind of mold, kind of damp, that kind of musty kind of aroma from it. Ginger Genius is saying currently 20% of off at Loch Lomond Distillery website. Grab yourself a bargain. Oh my goodness. I didn't know about that. That's not where I picked up this bottle at discount, but that's a good thing to know about, John. Well done. Sandro Fazzolari is saying, ciao Roy, I am catching up on the replays, but finally here and live tonight. Bravo, grazie, ciao a tutti. Thank you so much, Sandro. Thank you for being here. Great to have you, buddy. It's always nice to have you in live. Thank you for catching up on the replays as well. Christoph is saying, thanks, I will. Terrific, Christoph. And Pedro is saying there's a German distillery that uses the same kind of wood smoke, malt aquavitae. Amazing whiskies. He's said it. The German distillery is Hersinian. Okay, I'm obviously making a backside of that, Pedro, but thanks for pointing it out. Wood smoked, Pedro. And of course, I'm mindful of some of the American distilleries that are using various kinds of smoke and burning wood in order to imbibe the grain with the aroma of the smoke as well. It doesn't need to be from peat. I suspect that if you're from drier areas, you're not going to have a lot of peat close by. And I think that's what we want to talk about next before I move on to the, maybe not the next bottle, but certainly the one after that. Tyree is in saying, I believe Shen Kerala may have made whiskey with Bamberg wood smoked malt. There we go. So not only are you coming up with Bamberg, which is a wood I've never heard of, Tyree, but you're also bringing up a whiskey that I've never heard of either. Schlenkerla, is that, I wonder where that is. Is that in Europe? Is that in Australia where you are, Tyree? Nice to have you in, buddy. Tuning in early in the morning too. All right, let's get on with the next one. I had to do this. You know, I had a lineup. Like as somebody mentioned earlier, the old Ballantrae 15-year-old. That was in the offing. And when you talk about distilleries in the Highlands that have peated and unpeated production campaigns, you're kind of spoilt for choice. There's just so many of them. Some of them make a branding out of it. So they've got two. Think of Tomatin, for example, and Kuboken. You know, lightly peated. Kuboken, they say it's lightly peated. It fairly is on the palate, but the malt that they use for Kuboken is fairly heavily peated. Although they do tend to play around with it and blend it with unpeated malt and things before distillation. There's so much choice available, But what I ended up doing was just indulging myself tonight, because there are bottles here that are corked and sealed that I want to get open. And the way I get bottles open is I make content out of them and I share them with you in the vPub. A couple of bottles that are here off to the side, including that in Schmoen, are very, very recently picked up, but one or two have been kicking around a wee bit longer than that, and it's about time they were cracked open. So it was easy for me to push bottles off to the side that I've already opened on vPubs in the past in order to prioritize with these. See if you can guess what this is. Now you see the top of the bottle. You'll know what it is straight away. A couple of weeks ago, I was joined by the guys who are responsible for this whiskey, but they also joined the Independent Spirits Festival in Leith the weekend after that they were on with me. And they brought along this to sell. So this is a whiskey you would normally have to go and enter a ballot for, whether it's direct with those guys or whoever else. It would be very, very difficult to get a hold of this. This is Dornock Distillery. This is some of the most scarce malt whiskey that exists in Scotland. Think of the tiny, tiny distilleries that are there. Edradour is tiny, right? It's very small, but much, much smaller than that is Daftmill, you know, less than 100 casks a year. And then much smaller than that again, or a little bit smaller than that again, is Dornock, the tiny fire station distillery. These are really tiny output distilleries. This is a 50 cl bottle, and all of it disappears as soon as it goes on sale. This is really, really quite special liquid, and it's loved, and it's also expensive. I picked this up, purchased it over the table at Independent Spirits Whisky Festival. What a festival it was, just fantastic. And I paid £100 on the day for it, and I forgot to use my £5 off voucher, but £5 off this versus £5 off a £35 bottle is the same, right? So it was okay in the end. Let's get it in the glass. I don't think we'll get a glug from this. We do. We get a wee glug from it. But I know what you're saying. Roy, is that peated? Is that peated? Is that peated? It doesn't matter. It's not what I want to focus on when I talk about Dornock in this session. I want to talk about, this is a Highland malt whiskey, but there is more than one way, even in Scotch, even in super tightly controlled Scotch, to get peaty, smoky flavours into whiskey, to season our whiskey with a little extra layer of flavour. And this wee bottle gives me a good excuse to open tonight as part of Peatfest. It's not a typical bottle that you would expect me to be opening as part of this session tonight. But the reason is that this is unique from Dornock for a couple of reasons. I believe it to be their first small batch, the first time that they've vatted casks together, as opposed to single cask for releases. But I think it's pretty unique in that it is using ex-Islay quarter casks. So we've got here not just ex-Islay casks, but ex-Islay quarter casks, smaller casks, much more active casks. So what we have here is it's a 2019 vintage, so 5-year-old bottling from Thompson Brothers that's been matured in these two ex-Islay casks. Now, after my 2-inch moans, am I going to pick up peat on the nose here? I have to say, as I've poured it into the glass, I'm not getting much kind of in the room generally, but I'll stick my nose in a second. So what I want to do is move from this kind of getting the peat in from the cask into peaty flavours in general, and how it's changed over the centuries. And much more interestingly, how it's changed over very, very recent times. Because it's changed in a way that as whiskey drinkers and enthusiasts, even for us that have been drinking whiskey for, like me, for 20 years, there's a lot of you out there that's going to be enjoying whiskey even longer than that. But even with those timescales, we can't really appreciate just how fundamentally our malt whiskey has changed in the last 50 years even. And I'm not speaking about the broad sense. I'm speaking specifically about how it's changed with regards to peat. This is a chunk of peat. I've used it as a prop on the vPub before. Hopefully that's focused on that. It's basically, this is rock hard. This is quite brittle and hard here. It doesn't smell of, that's not true. It smells of smoke, but it shouldn't smell of smoke because it's organic matter, compacted organic matter. And this is a little tiny briquette that's been dried. But the reason that it smells of smoke is because I store it inside this little pot of smoky barley. I really didn't expect that to have a smoky smell, but it does. Anyway, you know, there is a bit of a smell to it beyond the smoke, but it smells a wee bit like you would expect anything organic and dried to smell like. I think just it's got a wee bit of a kind of dusty, dry. It doesn't matter. The reason that we get any kind of flavor or seasoning or smell from this is because this is a fuel source and it's burned, and it's the smoke from this, the heat and the smoke from this used to dry barley that traditionally imbued the grain with smoky aromas and flavors. But let's talk a wee bit about why the whiskey that we enjoy today tastes very, very, or it's unlikely to taste anything like the whiskey, the smoky whiskey that was once enjoyed just a few decades ago. I've already tasted this whiskey before. I tasted this at the Thompson Brothers tasting that we hosted together in Glasgow in January. They brought this along pre-bottling as a wee kind of look into the future. And I think that's exactly what I'm sipping in what I'm nosing in the glass right now. It smells fantastic. It smells very, let's start broad, very rich and dense and thick, oily, viscous, green, come on, Roy. Maybe a wee bit of green oak, maybe a wee bit of green. It's not vegetal green. It's not tomato vines, but there is something green about it. I need to work out what it is. Not getting a lot of smoke from it at all. I suffer from peat blight at the best of times. I do smell smoke from the Loch Lomond tonight, no problem. But this one's just so much quieter. Let's see how we got on. Let's cover it for a little bit. Put a wee coin over it, let the smoke and aromas build up. Get the glass nice and coated as we do that. See what it does for our aroma. Hoyt is saying, do we think there may be a renaissance of peated whiskey from Islay in the near future? A renaissance of peated whiskey? I mean, Islay's going great guns right now. Because we've got peat production, we've got the peatiest whiskey on the planet being produced at Bruichladdich again. So Bruichladdich for 50 years didn't make peaty whiskey, right? It was making a blend product. And now they're making Port Charlotte and they're making Octomores. Bunnahabhain are making Stoisha, Tochik, Moynia, you know, all the different brand names they've got for their peaty whiskey. We've got Ardnamurchan, a brand new distillery on Islay, making peaty whiskey too. The South Coast distilleries are going great guns, and they're joined by Port Ellen again, making peaty whiskey. So I wonder, while a lot of the distilleries, Colilla, others are making lower peated or unpeated malts, generally speaking, Islay is still the hotbed of peaty smoky whiskey, and it's still synonymous, I would say, Hoyt. In terms of a renaissance, I think we have enjoyed that. And it continues. Ryan Sutherland is saying, put your peat away. So I guess 8 doors, we're going to see mostly unpeated product out there. Everyone is saying, I remember early in my whiskey journey, I took my toes into peated whiskey with a Highland Park, and now I barely taste it. However, Benromac 10 Imperial was my epiphany peated Scotch. So the Imperial he's talking about there was the 57.1% 100 proof Benromac that we all miss. But really, we've got the cask strength, and I think in my experience, it's pretty much every bit as good, right? Alice saying the barley making the peat smoky. Now I am confused. I know, Al, right? But it's just the way it's been stored. You know, it's this wee briquette of peat has been buried in this wee jar and sealed and amongst all that kind of peaty, smoky barley. And it's obviously, there's a just general kind of dry smoke from it there. So it's not the way it's supposed to work. You're absolutely right. The peat smoke is supposed to do the barley. Good point. Okay, let's talk about how things have changed. So a wee sip of this first, I have to. I'm struck by a green note, but I can't easily describe it to you. Wow. So the ABV is helping here. Lots of spice. Again, this is the top. There's a wee bit of a kind of wine, champagne, a bitter dry twist to this at the end. I'm looking for a smoky thing. So I think on the finish, there's a wee puff of smoke coming through on the end there, on the palate. But that's not, it doesn't lead with that. There's so many other things going on here that it's going to take me a while to even get to the smoke on this. You know, I'm using this as a prop to talk to you about how, you know, peat can end up being part of the whiskey experience through the cask. Almost always deliberately, but occasionally accidentally too. Before I move on to talking about other things. But as I sit this in front of you now, I realise that this is not flavour-wise appropriate for a peat fest. There is peat as part of the discussion here, but it's not really strong or forceful on this malt. This is quite a dry, slightly acidic and bitter, deliciously oily and thick. It's like a sweet tea, a sweet green tea. Thick, dense, lots of kind of fermentation room type notes as well. A little bit bready, a little bit of olives. That's maybe the green thing. Is that what I'm getting? Like an olive thing. So mix that with the bread, you've got a kind of olive bread thing. Moorish is drying on the finish. So as soon as your palate senses that drying thing, you kind of want to recharge your palate quite quickly again. Insanely unique. There's a... You could pour this for anyone blind, and you wouldn't need to talk to them about Dornock or how small the production is or how scarce the liquid is. You wouldn't need to mention any of that. Most people would be able to taste this and know that they're sipping something special. Oh, it's good. It's just good. It's just good. Moorish, tart, acidic, drying, curious, interesting. Anyway, let's talk about why peat was once upon a time crucial and today a bit less so. And I want to talk about how I have been dipping in and out of... when I first got this book, I read it. And more recently, I've just kind of been dipping in and out of it, to looking at the index and picking out various kind of mentions of distilleries or whatever I'm researching, or that type of thing, looking at the content, and just kind of using it as a dip in and out of. But what I've realized as I do that is I need to read this again. This should be an annual read. This is Mike Billett's Peat and Whiskey. Now, Mike came up to me and said hello at the Independent Spirits Festival. Really nice to meet you, Mike. I realised that we ended up just getting distracted and separated and things. It would be really nice to spend a bit more time with you. I'm very glad to have met you. And I hope that I had the opportunity to get across how much value I've got out of this wee book. This should be annual reading for me, but this should be annual reading for everyone. But there's a problem. People look at the title of this book and think that it's all about peat. They think this is going to be a story about peat and talking about the organic makeup of peat and going into the science of it and things like that. Actually, this is one of the most readable books you can pick up on whiskey. Every chapter is almost like a little individual story arc, and it's inextricably mapped with the history and developments and rise and fall and changes and dynamics and politics and everything in Scotch. It's like so many of the books out there that as soon as you talk about any kind of specific element, you have to reference the backdrop and the context, which means you end up talking about whiskey in general. This is a fantastic book. I urge you, even if you're the type of person who doesn't like peaty whiskey, this is a valuable, valuable book to have in your arsenal to build your understanding of whiskey. Anyway, a lot of the discussion and comments and little nuggets and things that I'll drop throughout tonight is going to be from this book. So a huge shout out to Mike Billett. I've had this book for a couple of years now. I think it's just a fantastic thing. One of the best, I'd say one of the best books I've got on my shelf. That's how much I rate this book. And its readability, pick it up at any point, and the next thing you know, you've devoured a couple of chapters. It's that type of book. He is much more succinct than I am, talking about a very specific dynamic that happened with the production of whiskey. And that is, you know, post-war, you're kind of digging yourself out of recession. You build yourself into economic strength again. People are starting to have lots of leisure time. They're starting to look to elevate lifestyles and things. And drinking Scotch becomes a thing, not just in Europe and North America, but globally. And tumblers of ice and Scotch whiskey getting thrown on top of it just becomes a kind of drink. It was the Hollywood era of Scotch whiskey's boom. That meant that there was a lot of pressure on the Scotch whisky industry to increase capacity back then in the 50s and the 60s, specifically into the early 70s. And one of the ways that they could increase their capacity was based on the footprint of the distillery, the real estate. Malt floors take up a lot of space. And almost all distilleries that were known for having a savoury, smoky, lightly peated, heavily peated style, they almost always took care of their own in-house maltings, and they would have had maltings on site, taking up a lot of space, very labour intensive. A huge part of whiskey production is malting of the barley. Today, we can still see that happening at Bowmore and Laphroaig. We can see it happening at Kilchoman now. They've got a malt floor installed. We can see it at Benriach and Balvenie. We can see it at Highland Park. There are distilleries up and down the place where we can see it, but there's only one distillery still today that malts all of its own barley in-house, Springbank, and I think that has got so much to do with the density of flavour and the character of that Campbelltown whiskey. So much of that Campbelltown funk that we talk about is down to the malt floors. I believe it's nothing scientific, it's just in my gut that I feel that could be true. However, there was a time that model at Springbank was everywhere, right up until the 1960s and even into the early 70s. This was a model. In 1960s, Lagavulin, in fact, Lagavulin right up until 1974, was malting from its own in-house malt floors. In the late 60s, the owners of Lagavulin, DCL, put out an announcement that over the coming years, They were going to close down the malt floors across their distilleries. It was going to affect up to 20 different distilleries, meaning that they would, I think it was 30 different distilleries actually, meaning that they would lose 200 jobs. I'm quoting directly from the book here. So think of that change that DCL, that's Diageo, the pre-runner of Diageo, Distillers Company Limited, were just going to get rid of their malt floors. That means what? Homogenization, efficiency, streamlining, increased capacity, everything to make space for the dynamics and the pressures that they were under back then. Nothing to do with preserving the flavour, character or style of the whiskey. Certainly destructive to any notion of terroir that comes from peat. Why? Because if you've got a malt floor in the distillery, you're not going to ship peat from the other end of the country. You're going to use the peat that is closest to you, the peat bog that is farmable, that is open, that is harvestable. You're going to take the closest peat available to you and use that. When that malt floor is removed, you're going to end up with a centralized malting hub, an industrial scale malting hub that's going to have drum maltings typically. It's going to use warm air to dry the barley and things like that. And if you do want a peated malt barley to come from that centralized maltings, they're going to just bring in peat. Potentially the closest peat to the centralized maltings. Very, very different from the peat that would be local to the distillery. This is huge, a huge impact on flavour and style of individual malt whiskies. Now, back then in the 50s, 60s and 70s, they didn't care about that too much. Why? Because they were blending anyway. They weren't really precious about the individual character of the malt, as long as they could use the individual ingredients to get to the end goal of that consistent blend. That was okay. Efficiency and homogenization and consistency were prioritized over individual distillery character. Consider how significant that individual distillery character is when we talk about peat, the local terroir of the, because we are speaking terroir by definition. When we talk about peat, we are absolutely talking about terroir, where we dig that up, what it's made up of, what that earth, what that ground, what that soil is made up from, whatever decomposes from, whether it's forests or grasslands, seaweed, sphagnum moss, whatever it may be. It's going to be very, very different depending on what peat you dig up and burn. The smoke that it produces is going to be very, very different. So it's going to produce different flavours in the barley and the grain at the end of it. Now consider just how significant that change is. And then consider why distilleries like Glengarry are moving back to a model of malt floors close to the distillery, in fact, in the distillery itself. Consider why people like Laphroaig, potentially Bowmore, Highland Park, even though it's only 20 or 30% of their production, retain those in-house maltings because they believe that it so significantly changes the character of their whiskey. Now imagine Lagavulin that's distilled pre-1974 and post-1974. You can imagine that there's a good chance it's pretty, pretty different stuff. Same for every distillery. This is huge. This is a seismic shift in the flavour profile of Scotch whisky during this period. We know how much impact this could have potentially had because we can still taste it today, not by tasting pre and post, because we can't afford to do that. It's very, very difficult to do that. And we've also got the issue where it's been in bottle for decades and it's going to have changed as well. But we know that there are places out there like Benriach that will give you a bottle of everything from their in-house malt floor and everything that is produced under the regular regime. We're not talking about peat there. There's no peat smoke in that mix, but the difference in flavour is utterly significant. So you take that and add peated malt into the process as well, where the smoke, where the makeup of that peat that's been used as a fuel changes. The barley, the flavour of the barley, the profile of the barley, it is huge. We're all into this thing for flavour. We love these whiskies for flavour. I think it's a huge, huge, huge part of it. We love our peaty whiskies, we really do. Another reason that we know it to be true today is we know that Islay peat is different from mainland peat. We maybe don't know the difference between northeast and, you know, western, closer to, there's not a lot of western Highland peat bogs, but things that are closer to the west, things that are close, southern peat bogs, things like that. We sense that there's a difference there, but it's a demonstrable difference when we go to Islay peat with its kind of salinity, with its kind of, you know, it's sphagnum moss based, it's seaweed based peat bogs, that type of thing. Salty air, constant salty air, versus something that's much more kind of earthy and aromatic, a bit more kind of northeast peat bog in style. Anyway, is this romance? Is this nostalgia? Or do you see how such significant changes in the production of whiskey can change what we enjoy? Jimmy Legacy, talking about peat has to be tough for a man with peat blindness. That's right. Peat blight, as we call it, or peat blindness, it works. And I tend to find that I go through phases where it is really, really difficult for me to detect peat. Much the same way that you kind of dial out spice in food, really strong flavors. You're going for stronger and stronger coffees and things like that because you become desensitized to it. Sometimes to take a break for a wee while works. Sometimes also just sipping something that is really, really strongly peated, very, very smoky and obviously peaty, kind of tunes your mind and your palate back into the flavor, and you can start to pick it up. And this is just me speaking personally, Jimmy, of course. You can start to pick it up in more subtle places. Recently, I've been able to pick up peat smoke again a wee bit better, but I fully expect that at some point in the near future, I'll pick up a glass of really strong, smoky, peaty whiskey and smell and taste right past the peat again. It's just part of it, I think, for me. Greg Stafford is saying, evening, Barflies Aquaviti. I'm sipping on a Bamore Vault Edition 1 Atlantic Sea Salt. That's that one, isn't it, Greg? I love the tropical notes in it. I love the tropical notes in Bamore, refill cast, but ex-bourbon cast, that type of thing. That Atlantic Sea Salt is one of my favourites. It's become a legendary thing over the years of the vPub. Very jealous that that's what you're sipping right now. I absolutely love this stuff. Still some of it out there in the market. Bamore Vaults Edition #1 Atlantic Sea Salt, an absolute cracker. And Jimmy is saying, so Hollywood ruined whiskey by forcing the removal of floor maltings, Aquaviti. I knew it. Yeah, I mean, the popularity of whiskey destroyed that local kind of sense of terroir in whiskey back then. Tyree is saying, considering Diageo have proven themselves not to be trustworthy stewards of peat, reference Port Ellen maltings, more independent maltings with peat kilns will be necessary for the future. Yeah, I was interested to think about that. The idea that because Diageo just drew up the drawbridge on Port Ellen, they decided that in future they were not going to supply anyone outside of the Diageo portfolio. So you can imagine places like Tobermory Distillery on Mull, for example, were going to suffer. Ardbeg down in the south coast, Tobermory owned by CVH Spirits, Ardbeg owned by LVMH. Suddenly they were going to have to find new places for peated barley, sorry. So that significantly changes things again. We talk about Diageo or DCL or whatever, and obviously their decisions impact things because it's corporate level, it's large scale, they've always been the biggest. So it really does have a huge impact. But what it does do is it means that smaller producers diversify or spring up, as Tyree points out. So silver linings and all of that stuff, who knows? Doodle the Drama is saying, if I find the difference in peat of a number of distilleries amazing. Highland Park especially has such a very special outsidey peat that does take you on a wee fantasy hiking trip. You know, I think we touched on this, Arnie, when we were sitting together at the Glasgow Whisky Club on Tuesday night this week. You're in a very, very special place, and you're also, if I could go back to me sipping whiskey in my second or third year of sipping whiskies, I think you are, or first or second year, you know, if I had the ability to somehow harness the definitions I could taste back then when I was a beginner and retain it until now, I think that would be very potent. I think you're able to pick up things that experienced whiskey drinkers are dialing out and tasting past. Sure, experienced whiskey drinkers are tasting and enjoying things, maybe more subtle things, who knows, that you're not able to taste yet. But I also think that you have a superpower, a certain superpower that a lot of experienced whiskey drinkers don't have. I see it all the time in the blind tastings I host. You know, there's 60 people in a room and the beginners are able to do this. Oh, this one's smoky. Immediately, and pick out the smoke in a Highland Park or a Benromac or a Springbank. Immediately. Whereas people who have been drinking whiskey for years and years and years, they can pick up a Springbank, a Benromac, or even a Highland Park and not get the smoke. Peat blight is not only something that aquavitae suffers from. It's a real thing out there, and it's not just peat. So there you go. Alistair McPhail is saying, did Roy just say terroir? I did. I've been using it, but I've been using it in the right sense tonight. Jimmy Legg is saying, what whiskey do you find to be the peatiest? I would say, as a very general statement, I would say the whiskey that I find to be the peatiest would tend to be something young from the south coast of Islay, for example, and also something that has not had too much of an active cask. So the peat the smoke is very forefront. So you're not just getting the kind of the smokiness from it, Jimmy, but you're also getting that really quite, whether you want to go in the earthy note of things, whether you want to kind of talk about it in a salinity or a seasoning type sense, but that really quite pungent sense of kind of specifically peat smoke. So not ashen, not coal, not wood, you know, not soot smoke, that kind of thing, but actually damp, aromatic, thick peat smoke. It's the, you know, the Venn diagram of it all is significantly overlapping, but there are significant differences. There are reasons that you lean towards peat when you're talking about describing a whiskey rather than kind of cold smoke, wood smoke and ash and soot and that type of thing. So the peatiest for me, I know that Octomore is by fennel count, pre-distillation, the highest, but they're the peatiest. They market themselves as the peatiest. But for me on the palate, it tends to be something young, often from Islay, that type of thing. And Arnie is saying, I might really be turned into smoke and char notes because when I smell them, it usually means trouble at work. Okay, if you're working, if you're wood turning and things like that and you smell it turn, absolutely. You're absolutely switched on to that type of thing. And Jimmy's saying, yeah, I mean peaty, not smoky. Legic 10 is the killer for me. Okay, wow. And yeah, I can kind of get it. And Blackfin Conrad is saying, for the peatiest whiskey, I reckon, is Knocknamonia by Torrevake. Take some beating. I would agree that that's a good shout. But the Knocknamonia is I believe, the sherry cask one. But I would suggest that any of the Torrevake releases to date are very, very strongly peat forward. And also, personal opinion incoming, despite being on Skye, very reminiscent of Southern Islay style. And a wee bit of when you get a nice peaty Colila, when you get a strongly peated Colila. Some people say that Colila is lightly peated, and in my experience, some of the most big hitting peaty experiences I've had have been from Colila. Tyree is saying science is still out on full analysis of non-phenolic content in peat smoke, but we do know there's a lot else going on. You'd be a fascinating guy to spend the night chatting to, Tyree. It's nice to have you in here tonight. Reb Mordecai is saying I have a trouble picking up the peat in First Fill X PX Sherry Cask single malts. The PX just smothers the peat. Reb, I think that we are going to get to that tonight. Hang on a wee bit longer. Rick Johnson is saying a late arrival and good afternoon from the San Francisco Roy and a fellow wonderful barfly is glad to jump into this conversation. Rick, You're back home in San Francisco now after another wee tour of Scotland. It was great to see you and is Catherine, isn't it? It was great to see you both over in Scotland again for a wee visit. Your smiling faces bringing a lot of happiness to all the environments that you were in, buddy. Glad that you're home safe. Alice saying, Roy, talking of terroir, is there any update on Waterford's situation? Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of yet, Al. I don't know what the situation, the story is there. I don't know if there's a lot of whiskey selling, assets selling, or if there's a rescue in place. Whiskey Weekend Drama is saying, it would be younger cask strength Lechic from Harrow saying, like this 7-year-old cask strength, yummy. Jimmy's saying, Kalila, I find it very peaty on the nose, but it goes missing a bit on the palate. And I think it always depends on the cask treatment, right? Whether it's going to kind of, overtake, not necessarily smother, as Reb says, the peat, but certainly overtake the peat, or if it's going to help amplify that peat. Anyway, loving the Dornock. By far the lightest peat that I'm probably going to be sampling tonight. And yet, whoa, a nice wee smoky hit on the finish. So on that Dornock, and I think I picked that up a wee bit earlier as well, any kind of smoker, ash, or peat thing that you're going to get is going to be on the back end, and that was a kind of more ashy note on the finish. Let's go on with another uncorking here. We've gone all the way up to Dornock, all the way up to the Northern Highlands there. We're going to come right back down to the southeast, the southeastern Highlands, or Southern Highlands, and I'm going to go to a distillery that brought this idea back. So we imagine that all of the distilleries have lost their in-house floor maltings and things like that, and Edradour gets brought back on stream. Andrew Symington buys Edradour, and I think in the 1990s, didn't he? And he brings Edradour back, very, very small scale distillery, and Edradour starts to make its way back onto the market again as a single malt. But obviously, he works out that a very, very local distillery back in the day, famed apparently for its peaty output, was a distillery called Ballechin. And Andrew decides that he's going to bring the Ballechin brand back, and he brings it back to Edradour under the name Ballechin, and he brings back this peaty style. Now, back when Ballechin came out, there would have been a lot of people that would have considered that Ballechin, a peaty whiskey from the Southern Highlands, that's just odd, it's bizarre. But there you go. It exists in 2003 in earnest, in anger. The team up there at Edradour starts to make peaty malt once more. Their 10-year-old, the one in the bottle tonight, first appeared on the market over a decade ago now. So this Ballechin, even with a 10-year age statement on it, has been out there for a long time. Ballechin has been on my shelf for a long time in various forms. There's quite a lot of it around. It's very, very small batch Ballechin. This one isn't. This is one of their most kind of common, most obvious bottles with a 10-year age statement on it. This branding, this bottle's been around for a long time. What we like to see about this, not all Edradour products are fully natural. Some are diluted, some are down at 40%. I know that they're changing that going forward. But this one has always been natural. It says natural colour on the label. It says unchill filtered. It's got a 10-year-old age statement on there as well. Everything that we need, the A, B, C, Ds of whiskey, if you like, fully natural stuff. What's really cool about this is that Edradour, especially the 12-year-old Caledonia and things like that, is heavily sherry cask reliant, of course. That's a bit more expensive. That's kind of up in the 58, 60 plus pounds, maybe north of 60 pounds for that Caledonia Edradour. But the Ballechin is always sat a bit more attractively priced. I picked this bottle up, going from memory, for less than £50. I think mid-40s. Okay, so you just go with the first thing. This Ballechin, just nosing that. Yes, I got smoke, but I got really sharp apples. And I think the first note is something to pick, because the previous whiskies that you've been sipping, the environment that you're sitting in, but the first note is usually quite a pronounced thing. There's usually, when you stick your nose in something that's different, a bit of a contrast, it's going to give you a blast, a big siren of something particular. And it's sour apple, it's cooking apples, it's maybe sour apple candies. It's quite sharp, and it really kind of distracting. And if we talk about that idea of a kind of a warm peat, so we're not talking salinity here, we're not talking minerality, we're not talking iodine, we're not talking salt and seaweed or that type of thing. We're talking about a warm, almost like a fire, a hearth, a fireside smoke. This is like you're burning a pile of dry leaves. It's wood smoke. It's a nice kind of log burner type nose. Warm. There's quite a marmalade note coming in now. Lime marmalade even. So with the theme tonight, just on these three whiskies, the Loch Lomond, the Dornock, and this, the theme has been peat, but I can't. It's difficult for me to find language to articulate just how utterly different it is. Clit's to saying, really enjoyed my pour of ex-bourbon Ardmore. Beautifully warm, earthy peat on top of sweet vanilla cream. That's kind of what I'm getting. Maybe the sweetness and the vanilla cream will join with it. I'm not getting much of that, but the warm, earthy side, Clits, I'm getting. I think I might move on to something sherry, though. He's saying Ardna sherry cask, perhaps. Hold that thought. Hoyt is saying, catch you on the replay. Thank you for joining, Hoyt, and it's nice to have you back on the replay, buddy. Are you comfortable? Clits is saying, okay, I'll join you. Opening a 12-year-old straight from the cask, ex-bourbon Ballechin. Fantastic, Clits. And Black Fen is saying, Signatory bought Edradour in 2002. Okay, so much more recently. So yeah, that does make sense. Yeah, Signatory have been going since the 80s, 2002. Yes, thank you, Conrad. RW has bought me a dram. So here goes for these nerdy little info gems. Thank you very much, RW. I wonder if I know you as another name. Thank you very much for your generous dram. I hope I have been missing some. Cheers, Roy, says Hoyt, celebrating finishing 4 months of house remodeling. Not for the faint-hearted. I would agree with you there, Hoyt. That must have been a pretty stressful time for you, buddy. I didn't notice your dram coming in there. I apologise for that. Very poor on me. I'll raise this wee glass of Ballechin, buddy. Raise a glass to you, Hoyt, and say cheers to you. And you must be looking forward to relaxing now that the remodelling is close to an end. It never really truly ends, though, buddy, does it? Cheers. I love whiskey. So different again. So different. We're all in a similar theme, but somehow that's why we get into the weeds with all the language, all the kind of labels, all the we're trying to describe what this is doing, why this is so different. There's just smoky whiskies I'm sipping tonight, but they're so different. Jimmy Legg is celebrating being a member of Barfly for 61 months. My goodness. What whiskey do you find to be the peatiest he mentioned? I think I picked that one up earlier. Hey, Jimmy, thank you for being a member of the Barflies for 61 months. This is the sip I've just had, the Ballechin. For me, regardless of how much peat blight I suffer from time to time, this is a type of whiskey that I have to hope that I would pick this up and sip it. That apple thing, that tart apple thing, but the smoke is so obvious here. It's so much part of the glass that if I didn't smell smoke on this, it would be worrying. It can happen depending on the environment, depending on what I'm looking for, depending on what I'm tuned into. But yeah, smoke is very, very potently smoky. And alongside that tart apple thing, there is a wee bit of a kind of weird savoury thing. Well, a bit acidic, not a different acidic from the Dornock. This is like a wee bit of maybe a wee sliver of a vinegary thing, almost like a wee Worcester sauce thing or something like that. For anybody that that's quite a parochial thing. It's very kind of UK based, if anybody knows what Worcester sauce is. But it's something like that. Just a wee bit of it. Maybe a cask note. Regardless, quite excellent. There's a couple of really, really interesting bottles to uncork after this. But the reason that I've put this one in here is that 10-year-old, we've got 10-year-old Edradour, fully natural, all the specs on the label. Like I say, I think you can still pick this up for mid-40s, certainly south of £50 in the UK at least. That means that for a Southern Highland, very, very small output, and I know that Edradour 2 is now on stream, is quite scales things up considerably for Edradour. Focus on mostly making the malt for the Ballechin, I believe. However, this would have still been made before the commissioning of that distillery. This has been around a wee while. It's pretty good value for such a small distillery. And it's quite a characterful wee malt too. Apple sours, that's what it's like. So I think what people talk about in the States when they talk about that type of flavour, I think it's Jolly Ranchers. For us, it's kind of hard-boiled apple sour sweets, but also occasionally you'll get the kind of sweet, chewy toffees and things, apple, rhubarb type flavoured stuff. So a wee bit like that. Again, quite green. Another good one. Put it off to the side, but let's stay in the southeast Highlands. The price is going to go up a little bit, but the specs are going to remain very, very similar. But what I'm going to share with you now is the equivalent of a not yet closed, but virtually closed malt. Cletstone, my straight from the cask is very characterful. I definitely see the sour apple note now that you say it, but this has an almost mushroomy, savoury note underneath the smoke. Interesting, but quite a beast. So because this isn't a single cask, your straight from the cask is a single cask. This is the kind of more widespread available thing. So this is going to be a vatting of different casks. And here, very much on the palate, I would suggest that it's a pretty decent mix of ex-bourbon and sherry. The colour leans towards bourbon, I would say, a wee bit more. But yeah, not particularly strong sherry notes on this, not particularly strong bourbon notes. Yours is bourbon, isn't it, Clitst? Tyree is saying green apple, acetaldehyde usually indicates youth and or wine cask influence, in my opinion. Clear green apple on this, sour tart apple. Alice saying, gone for a Talisker 18 gentle peat. David is saying, I wonder what you paid for that. I'll probably back before the crazy price hikes, right? David is saying, I bet there is amoeba in Saturn that knows Worcester sauce. I totally get what you mean in that Ballechin. Underrated. Amoeba and Saturn that knows what Worcester sauce is. Okay, apologies if everyone on the planet knows what Worcester sauce is, and I'm being foolish, naive, of course. Tom Freni is here. Good to see you, Tom. Evening Aquaviti is saying, to keep with the theme, after a delicious long one, 18-year-old, I had one last night. I had one dram last night, and I treated myself to that, Tom. It went down an absolute treat. I got a wee bit of sherbet note last night that I don't usually get from it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. I've opened my Benevis, he's saying, traditional peated. I hope it's a cracker. Is that the 10-year-old? I hope it goes down well, Tom, and it's nice to have you in. Okay, so this, what am I talking about here? A distillery that's going to, they have not announced it that they're going to close. Not at all. But this is a distillery that for various reasons, in-house reasons, ownership reasons, they have been making peated whiskey for quite a while. Probably it's been peated in the past, and then it became unpeated, then it became let in sherry cask leaning and all that stuff. But they became very, very well versed at making unpeated campaigns and peated campaigns, and making it available in-house to their owners, Edrington, and then making it available on the brokerage market as well under the name typically Ruamore. This, the distillery I'm speaking about, is no longer owned by Edrington, it's owned by Lalique, and I'm speaking about Glen Turret. And in the bottle tonight, I have the 2022 release. So this has been around for a long time now. I hope it's still in good shape. I'm noticing there's quite a lot of staining on that cork there. I'm sure it'll be fine. But it's getting open tonight because it's been around for a while. You can still buy this. It's still out there. 60 to 70 pounds for the 10-year-old peated. They tend to release a 7-year-old as well, peat smoke version that's a wee bit cheaper. I went for the 10-year-old though. The specs on this is 50% ABV, which is a fantastic bottling strength for malt. Age statement, we believe this to be fully natural colour. I don't think Edrington add any colour to any of their malt whiskies. Even now that's moved to Lalique, I think it remains the same. It would be nice if they advertised it a wee bit louder on the label. It maybe says somewhere, it maybe says on the box. I've still got the box for this one. Don't know, but we believe it to be fully natural. 50% ABV is fantastic. It's a wee bit more expensive than the Ballechin I've just tried, but it's very, very close by. It's a very short drive from one distillery to the other. Both have welcomed visitors in the past. Edradour is now closed to visitors, unfortunately. One of the best distillery shops that ever existed was at Edradour. All the signatory vintage bottlings, of course. It's closed now. It's heartbreaking. Anyway, it is what it is. Glen Turret has gone the opposite direction, where they've invested hugely in their visitor centre, to the point that they've got a Michelin star restaurant. Even if you're just going in there for bar food, it's just fantastic. And the whiskey selection behind the bar is something to behold. A real celebration of the whole flavour map and diversity of Scotch whisky, not just Glen Turret, of course. But I've bought this one, the 2022, you can pick up the 2023, the 2024 releases. 2025 isn't out yet. Just because, that's the one that's getting open tonight. No glug from the straight-necked shoulders. But what I'm expecting from this, see what I mean about the cork? It's really quite dark, but yeah, perfectly fresh. No issues there at all. I suspect that despite this being a very close neighbour and very similar in style, a fairly small distillery, not a big concern, like Edradour, a bit bigger than Edradour. But remember, Glen Turret famously had the hand-roused mash tun, very small mash tun, I think the smallest of the legacy distilleries. Both making peated and unpeated campaigns under different malt names, Ballechin Edradour, Glen Turret Ruamore. I suspect that the malt is remarkably different. As I'm rolling this glass on the desk, you can't see this, but I'm seeing a real kind of rich red highlight to this, like a real deep copper. I wonder if there's a bit of sherry cask in this one. I suspect that yes, there is. On the nose as well. But immediately where this Edradour was challenging, that's sharp. The apple's now gone like powdered sherbet, sugary, but not sweet, just kind of tart, acidic apples. Whereas this is like a warm, soft, integrated, aromatic, comforting, dry mulch, if that can be a thing. Just a soft peat. Rich, tobacco pouch, citrus, but marmalade, cooked citrus, rather than fresh or sweet or tart or sharp or zesty. Cooked citrus like a marmalade. A chocolate even. Just elegant. What we've had tonight is a lot of character, a lot of extremes, a lot of things pushing out here. This has kind of brought everything in. It's kind of centralized everything. It's just, it's balance here suddenly, a richness, but undoubtedly smoky. This is a bit more expensive. I think mid-60s I paid for this. Okay, well, I've got the 7-year-old over there. A bottle of the 7-year-old. There's not much left in it. Didn't get on with it that well. It's taken me a long time to get through it. I think it might have been the 2022, a similar vintage release of the 7-year-old. I've had it for a while. Not the best. A little bit green, a little bit raw, a little bit elbows and knees, a bit jaggy. I think it's at 50% ABV as well. I think it's the same ABV. This is a completely different beast. This is the type of peaty whiskey you would pour for somebody and ask them to wonder what it is, and they would be all around the Islay flavour map, the Northern Highland flavour map. I think it would take them a while to land in Glen Turret. This is the type of whiskey that a lot of the Glen Turrets are overpriced. They're very prettified, they're very premiumised, but a lot of them are excellent value for money still, because a lot of them are still affordable, but very, very high quality malt whiskies. I think that's what I've landed upon here. 7-year-old, some of the recent kind of age-stated stuff from Glen Turret has been, oh, it's okay. This is good. If I picked this up for 60, 65 pounds, 10 years old, really well crafted, well rounded, well balanced, rich, fairly dense. The ABV is helping a lot here. It doesn't taste like 50, it just tastes perfect. About time someone bought you another one. You're buying the drams and dribs and drabs tonight, RW. Wish I knew who you were. Would I know you by another name? Thank you very much. Thank you for the dram. This is really, really tasty whiskey. This is just good quality whiskey. This is not the type of whiskey that I would pour to my pals from a Glen Turret 10 bottle. That's a weird thing to say. We should all be open-minded and just be, but we're not. We're weird animals, and we make up our minds. I would like to pour this for my whiskey-loving pals, blind, and say, what do you think this is? What do you think of it? Do you like this? I suspect they would like this. Andrew Pearce is saying, Aquavita just opened a Thompson Brothers 12-year-old bourbon cask Ruamore. Delicious stuff. Very meaty. A little burnt rubber, tobacco smoked charcoal, and a zesty lemon. I think this is a bit more balanced than your characterful expression from Thompson Brothers, you said. There is a wee bit of a kind of, if you were to lead me towards meaty end, maybe power of suggestion, maybe a little bit of a savoury element in here. But for me, it's more of a kind of jamminess. It's just a cracking wee pour. I'm glad I've got this open now. I know that sometimes we're looking for character, we're looking for different, we're looking for interesting and things to grab our attention. I don't think this does that in any kind of outlying, outfield, weird way. I think this grabs your attention by just being a wee bit like the Longmorn I had last night, just being perfectly in the middle of the flavour map. Balanced, almost any tasting note that anybody wanted to throw at you, you could go with, because it's just, it's got that, it just sits nicely in the center of things. It's got a nice, full, rich aromatic smoke backbone behind it, but you're quickly tripping over that to get into the fruit, into the richness, the density, the warmth, the welcoming nature of this glass. It's a good wee find. I'm not trying to sell anyone whiskey. I know that you can still pick up the 2022s out there, certainly 2023s and 2024s. Probably you've maybe got some on the shelf. If this has been ignored on your shelf, pick it up and have a wee pour, see what you think. It's been a wee bit pricey in the past. It's nice to go into the range and find where the value can still potentially exist. Danny Hebbington, superstar that he is generously purchased 10 Aquaviti memberships for 10 random barflies out there. Thank you very, very much, Danny, for your generosity. Stashing those Ruavor for the future. Me, says Pedro in Brazil, celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 23 months. Thank you so much, Pedro. We are wee gold barfly, my friend. It's nice to have you in, buddy. I hope you're keeping well. Cheers. Thank you, Danny, too, for your generosity. That's a nice wee find. A nice wee find. But I'm going to talk to you about, we're going to go right out west. Sorry, from your perspective, right out west. I saw this bottle at the Independent Spirits Festival. I held it in my hands and I looked at it, thought it was a gorgeous looking thing, and I thought, I need to pick that up. I need to buy that. It was early in the day. I just, all I had was my glass in my hands. I didn't want to carry anything. I didn't want to carry bags or anything. And I didn't, and I forgot about it. And I came away thinking, that's the one I wanted to buy. That's the one I wanted to buy. Lo and behold, I go on to one of our most popular online retailers, and it's still there. It was still available, which is amazing for this thing, because back in the days of COVID, this is the type of whiskey that you wouldn't have got. You would have disappeared very, very, very quickly. For me, there is a style of peaty whiskey that shouldn't work for this type of whiskey that I love. Okay, I like tropical, ethereal, fizzy, effervescent things, usually from bourbon casks, often even refill casks and things like that. That's this type of whiskey that I often choose. If I've got a selection on a shelf and I'm going to buy one, I don't care about colour. I care more about the description and the specs on the label and things like that. Often when I'm drinking whiskey, and the thing that makes me love whiskey and fall in love with whiskey all over again, time and time again, is often things that's slightly outside of my kind of comfort zone of that flavour profile I've just described. That is what this looks like to me. It could potentially be, because of my experience of this distillery, because of my experience of this whiskey in this type of cask, and just the prospect on paper looked like it was going to be one of those things that just seems to me to somehow work so well, despite the fact I wouldn't ever cite it or declare it to be my favourite. I'm going to share what it is in a second, and maybe some of you have already guessed what it is. Cheers, Roy, and Peat it is. Some interesting peat things being done here in Canada too. Glen Breton and out west at Macaloney's need to try. Well, I will be able to try, thanks to you, Graham Young, because you're very good at bringing me Glen Breton, Macaloney's, Canadian Club, Lot 40, and everything else in between. My Canadian whiskey shelf is not actually my Canadian whiskey shelf. It's become my Graham Young whiskey shelf, with a little selection in there from the Mark Kaufmans of the world, the Gino Cumos and things like that as well. You're an amazingly generous man, and thank you for buying me a wee dram tonight as well, Graham. Cheers to you, cheers to Claudette, cheers to the family. Cheers, big guy. Niall's bought me a dram to say, great vPub again tonight, Roy. Thanks. Sorry it's only a $5, but that Daftmill's left me budgeting for a couple of weeks. Al, listen, thank you for picking up the Daftmill. I really, really hope you love it. Like I say, I'm nervous, but I'm also quite confident. I can't wait till we're all just kind of sipping it together. Hopefully we have an opportunity in the future, Al. Thank you for supporting me. All right. I think the thing that just works so well somehow, and it doesn't matter if it's Islay peat, it doesn't matter if it's world peat, it doesn't matter if it's Highlands or Lowlands or wherever you make peat these days. Peat dialed up in a sherry cask, dialed up, Spinal Tap peat, if you like, seems to work. I'll never forget the 2016 or 2017 60.1% Bunnahabhain Moynia from an Oloroso cask specifically. Just stunning liquid. Stunning that could exist. They brought out Moynia and PX casks as well, Bunnahabhain. Anytime that you think of intense, it's almost like we ignore the age statement. We ignore the ABV even. Intense sherry cask, an intense peat. The peat seems to help the spirit retain its boldness and its character and its presence on our palate. And the sherry cask just delivers all of its kind of sherry cask glory, but it's still having to fight alongside the spirit. I don't know, I can't explain why it works, but it just seems to be a very powerful tool to bring people into the flavour diversity in Scotch whisky. That's why I was drawn to this. I want you to look at the colour of this first, and I hope that this translates. We're not just looking at dark whisky here. This is just a beautiful, and daylight, if you hold this bottle in daylight, the colour of this is so alluring. For someone that constantly goes on about how we don't need colour to lead us in our buying, purchasing decisions, that pale whisky can be delicious, then you end up with something like this. And you see the colour of it, and you see just how utterly attractive it is. It's beautiful. This is an Ardnamurchan. This is a 5-year-old Ardnamurchan, specifically a Nichols and Perks release. The specs on this bottle is 59.8% ABV. It was an outturn of 313 bottles. 2019 vintage, bottled in 2024, 5 years old. Finish, it says none, which is actually a nice, it's quite a glib thing, right? It's quite a tongue-in-cheek thing. Finish none. But that's important because that tells you that the 5 years is fully matured in the PX cask, cask number 2080. This is still available. It's 80 quid. It's not cheap. But for single cask Ardnamurchan, that is a good price. This is the last dram of tonight, and this was always going to be the last dram. Nothing to do with age, nothing to do with ABV, anything else. Everything to do with how will peat, Highland peat, get through 5 years in a pretty active PX cask. Arguably one of the most influential wood types that we use in Scotch whisky maturation. Maybe every bit, first fill PX is every bit and maybe more influential than even virgin oak, I would suggest. Smoke. So we know what Ardnamurchan, we know what peaty Ardnamurchan and unpeated Ardnamurchan smells and tastes like. So you're looking for a minerality, a briny outdoors note, a coastal element, seashells and slate and rock. But no, I'm actually not getting those things here. I have to be honest. I'm getting a wee sense of a rock pool, maybe. But what I'm getting is this huge hit of boozy maple syrup, sweet melted caramel and fudge, pure sherry, like sweet sherry, a little bit of a kind of cherry chocolate, dark cherry chocolate, Dark chocolate, yes, bitter dark chocolate, but also there's a kind of sweet swirl. There's a wee tiny hint of a firework. It's not sulphur, it's not off-putting in any way. It's kind of an outdoor struck match type thing. A wee bit of a I don't know if it's the peat or the rock pool thing. There's a wee bit of a tinned fish. Just like a cracked tinned fish. Oiliness. So this is one of those things you would just nose all night. But I'm ready. I'm you know, okay. Cheers. There's an element here that is so very, very potent cask. There's almost like a brandy Armagnac note to this at the end. This is PX, but not all PX is the same. We associate PX is going to be super sweet and syrupy and caramelly, and that's how it played on the nose. But there's almost like a cognac, Armagnac, brandy type, a dry, slightly bitter edge to this too, making it all the more interesting. That's not what I expected from that. Peat smoke is there, but it's not in your face. It's one of the kind of, maybe the only thing that was lighter on the peat tonight was that Dornock. This is, so here's what I hoped would play out tonight. Let's have another wee sip. Wild. Fantastic. Delicious. Moorish. Unique. Totally different from everything else that I've touched or sipped or nosed or anything. So I deliberately went all over the flavour map tonight. I deliberately went from really inexpensive £34 all the way up to £100 for a 50cl bottle, and this is right in between. This is 78, 79, £80, I think, somewhere in that order I paid for this. I picked this up this week. Completely different. I was all over the place to cover the Highlands in a very general sense, but also because I was confident by doing that and by looking at different casks, different expressions, different treatments of peaty Highland whiskies. I could take the idea of what happened in the 60s and 70s of destroying all the local malt floors, all the local kind of short supply chains from peat bog right to that local kiln, from taking that to putting it into this big homogenized pot of centralized maltings for efficiency's sake, for costs, for consistency. You know, homogenization is the enemy of flavor often. But what it's actually done, we're now 50 years down the road from all of those changes. For completely different reasons, we are still able to go out and pick up 5 on paper, similarly spec'd Highland peaty whiskies, and none of them, it's not even like they're different flavors. They're not even on the same page flavor-wise. Even the Ballechin and the Glen Turret, the real close neighbours, and on the labels, very, very similarly spec'd, completely different flavour prospects. Inchmoan. Two of the same expressions a few years apart, different. Homogenization. We talk about the difference between that Dornock with a super light touch of the Islay cask, that's the only influence there, versus a really, really potently peated Ardnamurchan with a very, very potent cask in this Nichols and Perk PX Ardnamurchan 5-year-old. I would love us to have local, independent maltings right next to the distillery, on the premises of the distillery. I would like to see the peat reek coming out of that pagoda roof today, right? I would like to see them drying their own barley in the house. We would have to pay a hell of a lot more for that. It would be much, much more expensive. The flavour would be absolutely a wee bit more inconsistent. It would be all over the place. Much more characterful though, sure. You know, the peaks would be a bit higher, but the troughs would be a lot lower too. I'm going to argue that it is different days. And there is no way anybody made the decision back in 1960, 1970 to just destroy the flavour. Let's strip out flavour. There's too much flavour in this. Let's make this whiskey shitter. Nobody did that. They made the decisions based on the pressures that they were under at that point in time. And one of the things that seemed obvious was to take away this really labour-intensive thing of in-house maltings and centralise it. And a lot of the effects that was going to have on the flavour and variation and styles and terroir, dare I use the word, of whiskey would not have been known, certainly, but wouldn't have even been thought about necessarily. But now, because we are so predisposed as whiskey geeks, whiskey botherers, maniacs, people that sit back, blow by blow, taste the note by taste the note, analyse within an inch of its life, we can look back and say, oh, of course that had a huge impact. What a shame, what a disaster. And yet, we're building back towards that again. Glengarry is reinvesting in malt floors, direct fired wash still, peated malt. Kythe Distillery is being built as we speak with all of that in mind. Ardnamurchan has been built with a malt floor to commission at any point that's appropriate in the future. We're getting back to that. And yet, even before we are fully there, I've just opened 5 Highland malt whiskies, and no 2 of them could even be put on the same plot in the flavour map. Maybe they would all be above the smoke axis, but above that axis, above that point, they would be all over the place. This is a treat time to be into whiskey. And the future only holds more treats for us. Looking to the past and looking back in time and history, when everything was locally floor malted, that's huge. That's a big thing, and it's something to understand. Some of us will maybe even be able to afford to go back in time a little bit and taste what those whiskies were. But for us, for me and for you, for us mere mortals, this is a privilege. The bottles I've opened tonight are just, there is none that do not deserve the space on my shelves. And some of them not only deserve the space in the shelves, but they deserve time in the glass to be shared and celebrated. This one is a peach too. About as subtle as a high velocity brick. Let's be honest. Cough medicine now. A little bit of menthol and mint, but just fabulous flavour. Still getting that slightly kind of brandy, Armagnac, wine type based note, probably just from a very active PX cask. I don't know if that's what's doing it, but fabulous nonetheless. What have I been missing from you guys? So sorry, got lost in myself. Danny Hebington is suggesting don't forget to hit that like. Aquavita is always a bit shy in promoting himself. I need to remember to ask people to do that a wee bit more. It's wonderful to have your support. It's wonderful to have you hitting the like. It helps YouTube and the algorithm, but more than anything, it helps other whiskey folk coming along to wonder why I've been chatting for, 2 hours and 10 minutes before we even hit the quiz at the end. It helps to reassure them that I do attempt legitimate content. Fantastic stuff. Anyway, for those of you that are planning to hang around for a wee while for the quiz at the end, I hope it's a good one tonight. I've tried my absolute hardest to pitch a quiz to you that is right in the middle of the difficulty map. We've gone from being quite easy in recent weeks to being obtusely difficult and awkward and horrible, and I don't think I want to deliberately do either. I want to just kind of create the quizzes, not put too much thought into it, follow my mood, and if you guys get 10 out of 10, great. If 10 of you get 10 out of 10 or 100 of you get 10 out of 10, even better. But if none of you get 10 out of 10, it's just the way that it's not being deliberate. That's kind of what I'm after. Daisy Vleeland is in tonight. Always great to see you, Daisy. I hope you're keeping well. Back in the Netherlands, Jimmy Legacy saying, never admit that you're trying. You want it all to look absolutely natural and easy, Jimmy. Like I don't really care. Aye. Let's see if I can get there one day. That would be good. Anyway, well, it's time for a wee bit of a quiz at the end. It's time to draw out our Peatfest for 2025 to a close. The next lock-in, I think it's a good idea to open the Daftmill and share it with everybody and have a taste along. But I'm going to talk more to patrons about how I'm deciding to come up with the topics and what I'm focusing on for the topics and things in the future. I think it's quite interesting. I've been doing a wee bit of over-analysis, probably, overthinking things. So it's probably time for me to dip in and speak to patrons once more and get the feedback from all of you. But I want to raise this wee glass right now and say that because I've released a Daftmill recently, I've seen a spike in Patreon support, and the cynics among us will see that spike and say, they're only here for that Daftmill. They'll get the Daftmill, they'll get that code, they'll buy the Daftmill, and they'll disappear. They won't become part of our community, and they won't stay and support Roy for much longer. I always lead with trust. So if people have signed up in recent weeks, I've made sure that there's enough Daftmill to look after my patrons who care about the Daftmill, and they will get a bottle. All of the people who care, who have supported me over time, will get a bottle of Daftmill. I'll look after them and make sure that's the case. If you step forward to support me in the recent weeks and recent days, you will also be looked after. I hope you stay a while, but if you want to just grab the code in the Daftmill and leave, then that's okay too. I'll always lead with trust. Most of the people that have been stepping forward, the Daftmill has just been the extra push for them to take the huge extra step that it is to go from just being a watcher, a passive consumer, to somebody who's saying, wait a minute, I want this content to endure. I want it to last. I enjoy it. I think other people will enjoy it, so I need to support it. The Daftmill is just that extra push forward. That's my takeaway from what's happened recently, and I'm grateful to everyone. I'm grateful to everybody that's stepped forward in the recent days. I'm grateful to the people that are grateful that there's a Daftmill available to them. But I'm mostly grateful to the people that I have been calling out tonight, that I was able to call out in 2022 and 2019, and even some of you, Everwind, Chris, as far back as 2017 when I started. It means so, so much to me. The whiskey will come and the whiskey will go. But the community, the support for each other, the realization that what we have right now is pretty precious and we need to look after it, means much, much more. Thank you for your trust and thank you for your support, all of you. If you've been here a while or if you're just in the door, you're welcome here. Cheers. Peter Lee, my pal from Paisley, saying, Aquavita, I care honestly. Maybe even care too much, like most barflies, helping the community grow from strength to strength. You're very good at it, buddy, and we appreciate you. We appreciate Denise, and we like the fact that you're here looking after us in more ways than one. Everyone is saying we want whiskey celebrity death matches. I'm not up for that. I'm either completely passive or manically over. It's just the best we leave it. Alistair McPhail is saying, I'll open my Daftmill to Aquavitae. Fantastic, Alistair, who's already had his Daftmill delivered. Danny Hebington, Aquavitae, you are the boy. Thank you, Danny. Thank you to you, buddy. We've not met yet, but that day will happen. I look forward to it. Gino is saying, you're a great man, sir. Cheers. Thank you, Gino. You're a very, very, very great man yourself. You're a gentleman, Gino. It's wonderful to have you, buddy. All right, gentlemen or not, let's get our waterproof breeches on. Let's wade in and challenge ourselves with a wee quiz at the end. I often imagine what it might be like just to sign off and not do a quiz at the end. And there would be mutiny. Oh, my pal from San Francisco has bought me a very generous dram. Arun, what a pleasure you are to have around, my friend. I hope you're enjoying that book. I hope that shirt fits, actually. Grateful for this lovely community you've created, Roy. Many great new friendships made. Happy International Whisky Day. Aye, I know that these things are very contrived and concocted and stuff, but it's always, if you're raising a glass, there's never a bad reason for it, Aaron, right? Happy International Whisky Day to you too, my friend. Thank you very much for the generous dram. Cheers, Arun. And RW has bought me what must be the third or fourth dram tonight to say happy to not have the Daftmill and just support you and us. Aye, here's to you and us. Was like us, Guy few, and they're all dead, as they say. Cheers. And I still need to work out what your name is. And I'm knocking back probably the strongest whiskey that I've been sipping tonight, 59.8% ABV, to raise a glass to all the generous drams. Thank you so much. All right, good luck, everyone. Remember, the quiz at the end is always multiple choice. It's always optional. Please play along in the hope you might have a wee bit of fun. You might learn a couple of wee things. It's not really education. It's just intended to be fun. But if we can get something more out of it, then surely that's a bonus. Alistair McPhail is saying Aquavitae, my favourite toast. And David Hong's bought me a dram. David, wonderful to have you in. You're always generous with the drams. Need to catch up on the last lock-in. Don't remember getting a notification. So sorry, David. You should. It always goes through Patreon. Always try. I do miss lock-ins occasionally, but always try to do at least one a month. And I think it's one of the nicest things for me to do as part of what I created. Is just hang out with the folk that support me and become closest on a Sunday night. Is fantastic. I love it. I always feel grateful after doing it. David, thank you for your dram. Good luck with the quiz at the end, David, and everyone. I think this is a perfectly pitched right in the middle of the quiz at the end. Let's see how you got on. Question 1, which of the following distilleries features an open mash tun? So those of you that you know your mash tuns, we've got open mash tuns. They're often cast iron. Steel mash tuns with copper lids, full lauter, semi-lauter. All different ways to cook the grain, basically. But I'm asking you which of these distilleries has an open mash tun. A, Bruichladdich on Islay. B, Glen Turret in the Southern Highlands. Or C, Deanston, also in the Southern Highlands. I was thinking recently if there has ever been a peaty Deanston in an Islay cask, maybe. Whiskey with Molly. Ben, you're in tonight, buddy. Always looking out for your name at the quiz at the end. Everwind has bought me a dram. Chris, so amazing to have hung out with you on that wee session the other night. Roy, I'm grateful what you and the community have created. Slancha, he's saying, thank you so much. Everwind, Chris. My house is littered with NASA memorabilia, thanks to the superstar that is, who doesn't love NASA, right? That is Chris Everwind. Ben Demon Hunter is in tonight as well. Fantastic. Good to see you, Ben. Good to have you here. Lachlan Mackenzie's still here. Pete Ed is here, of course. Frank, you are here. Clitzt, Billy Abbott. He's saying and B and B and C. So Billy Abbott's already answered. He says A and B and C. If I recall correctly, he's saying. Okay. There is a banana skin here, Billy. It's nice to have you in playing along at the end. I didn't get enough time to hang out and chat with you at Independent Spirits Festival, but it was nice to see you there. You were in the pub, you were in the Malt and Hops at the end of the night, but you were deep in conversation, and I was with folk as well. But one day we'll have a chance to have a right old chimwat. Always a pleasure, Roy says. Ben Demon Hunter. Thank you, my friend. Whiskey with Molly. Let's see what he's saying for this one. He's going with A, open mash tun at Brookladdy. Yeah, interestingly, you're absolutely right, Ben. Brookladdy actually purchased the original open mash tun, cast iron mash tun from Bunnahabhain, despite the fact they were both opened in the same year, 1881. They ended up with Bunnahabhain's open mash tun, and Brookladdy still operate an open cast iron mash tun to this day. Glen Turret did, as I mentioned earlier, it was hand roused, but they've now upgraded with a very small U to a semi-lauter mash tun. A semi-lauter is fixed rakes, so they are not using an open mash tun these days. But Deanston actually reinvested as well, the same as Glen Turret, but they reinvested back to an expensive, high energy open mash tun. So they've got a very fresh, new open mash tun at Deanston. So A and C are both absolutely correct. If you answered any combination of those, by all means, you get a point as we move into question 2. Which of these Highland distilleries produces malt known as Whitlaw? Which of these Highland distilleries makes malt known as Whitlaw? A, Balvenie, B, Tomatin, C, Highland Park. Today's Dramface article was an article about Whitlaw. That's why the wee Dramface logo is there. But the biggest takeaway from today's, apart from that fib whiskey Whitlaw that was reviewed, the biggest takeaway from today's Dramface article was the recollection of the Independent Spirits Festival. The Saturday that was the 4-part docu-series, followed by the 4 hours of the festival itself. What a joyous day. What a way to just be so grateful for whiskey in 2025. It was everybody was up for it. Everybody was ready for it. Everybody just rolled their sleeves up and had the best of times from my perspective. Rick Johnson is saying selfless promotion. Absolutely, Rick. Listen, I'm very proud of the team at Dramface. Dramface exists on the back of 30 people. Different writers, different people behind the scenes, social media, tech people, editors, sub-editors. It's a big deal. Tomorrow we're having a wee break. There won't be content going out in Dramface, but it's just a day for you to catch up on the endless content that goes out on Dramface. Different perspectives, all whiskey enthusiasts writing for whiskey enthusiasts. Utterly independent, community funded. What's not to promote, Rick? Anyway, as most of you have kicked it out the park, very, very easy. Whitlaw is indeed a trade name for malt produced at Highland Park. So if you answered C, good for you. Most of you are on 2 out of 2. Question 3. The latest Hollywood, this will be a wee bit more This will be a wee bit more tricky for most of you. The latest Hollywood release has been announced. It's named Pitch and is the last in the Founding series. It's a trilogy, but what is it named after? What is the last in the Founding series named after? The last in the trilogy is named after A, a sports connection. It's named after B, a whiskey production connection. Or C, it's named after an Edinburgh city connection. So I think the 3 have been, I'm going to forget one of them now, Amber or something, Embra, and now Pitch. What is pitch named after? A sports connection, a whiskey production connection, or an Edinburgh city connection? I think it's a wee bit tricky. I think it's tricky, and then you all come swinging in, nailing it. But Lachlan is Lachlan. I love the openness and the transparency. No idea, Lachlan's saying, but he's saying B, going with the flow. Not bitumen, then, says Mike Molasses. No, it's nothing to do with bitumen. No bitumen connection. Absolutely, spot on. Sports connection, rugby pitch, that type of thing. Edinburgh connection, no, it's nothing to do with Edinburgh City. It is absolutely to do with whiskey production, specifically talking about when they pitch the yeast. Two types of yeast, two different kinds of yeast used for that pitch. Holyrood release. Not tried it myself yet. Brand new to the market, completes their founding series. And the news went out in Dramface, and that's where I picked it up from. Question 4. What factor has stalled the installation, or the reinstallation maybe, of in-house maltings at Bruichladdich, specifically Saladin boxes? So this is not traditional kind of floor maltings where you turn and maintain the malt yourself. Saladin boxes is automated, pretty large scale. But there is something that has prevented Bruichladdich from investing in in-house floor maltings. What is that stumbling barrier? What is it? It is A, infrastructure limitations. It is B, spiraling costs. Or C, obsolete technology. Which of those three barriers is the primary reason for Bruichladdich stalling on its implementation of its plans for in-house maltings? Really enjoying this Ardnamurchan. What a way to finish the night. Intense, rich. I don't know how much raw Ardnamurchan is left in this glass here, but it's gorgeous. So let's say Ardnamurchan has to have contributed to that. What stopped Bruichladdich investing in its in-house maltings? A, infrastructure. B, costs. C, obsolete technology. Chuck, Malt Minion. What a pleasure to have hung out with Chuck in Edinburgh. Amazing. Come all the way over from Oregon, the US, to take in the Edinburgh. I would love to hear how you fared, how you got on, how you felt about it all, Chuck. It's encouraging to me that I see you back in here again afterwards. We've not put you off enough. Okay. This is splitting the crowd. Jimmy Legg thinks it's obsolete technology. George McLeod thinks it's infrastructure limitations. But James Morgan and Whiskey with Molly are both thinking, excuse me, are both thinking that it's spiraling costs. I can tell you that Islay has gone from 7 distilleries just a few years ago. The first time I visited Islay, 7 distilleries were operational there. And a couple of years' time, it could reach easily. It's 10 right now. It could reach easily 14. It could have doubled in scale. The problem there is infrastructure. And I don't mean infrastructure in the case of the state of the roads and the ferries and all of those things. I'm talking about the electricity grid. It's already overwhelmed, and the amount of energy that Saladin boxes installed at Bruichladdich means that it's prohibitive. My source for most of the questions at the quiz at the end is the Malt Whisky Yearbook, and that's certainly the case for this one. So it's quite incredible. In order to have floor maltings reinstated at Bruichladdich, we need to rely on an upgrade to the grid, the electricity grid. That is for it to be semi-automated, salad in boxes. Anyway, question 5. We're looking at a distillery, a slightly different angle on this distillery, and I'm just going to ask you where this scene is. Where are we right now? Are we A, on a Scottish island, B, in Northern Ireland, or C, on an English coastline? Where are we? A, a Scottish island, B, Northern Ireland, or C, an English coastline? Where are we in this scene? Thanks to everybody who hangs out with me for the quiz at the end. It's amazing. Sounds like some spin from Remy, says Billy Abbott. Ooh, could be true. Could be true, big guy. Sid Martin, good to see you in. Lassie Hjort Otsman, good to see you, big guy. Rick Johnson is still in here for the quiz at the end. Oh, come on. I don't know if he's complaining or if it's too obvious for you. Sorry, Rick. Gino is still here. Hellswood is here. James Morgan. Chuck is here. Graham Fraser. So good to see you, Graham. Dave the Brave. RW is playing along. Klitzt is playing, and George McLeod is here. Peathead is saying, kind of looks like Mull to me. Bruce Bernard is in. Fantastic to see so many of you in playing along. Absolutely. Most of you seem to think this looks like Mull. I can tell you, well done. You're absolutely spot on. This is a slightly different angle and take on Tobermory Distillery in the island of Mull. It's a Highland distillery. Their peated output is Lechic. It didn't fit for tonight because it's an island instead of mainland, but maybe in the future Peatfest episodes will visit Lechic. Question 6. Of the 7 interviewees for the 2025 Malt Whisky Yearbook, My View on Whisky featurettes, how many were active YouTubers? So there were 7 interviewees. They were given a Q&A by Ingvar Rond, and they all very privileged to have their faces appear there. Great fun. How many of the 7 were active YouTubers? A, 4, B, 6, C, 2. I hope that if you participate in the quiz at the end, that you enjoy not only purchasing the Malt Whisky Yearbook from Ingvar Rond, it's just a fantastic thing, a fantastic asset to enjoy whisky with. But I hope that you enjoy carrying it with you and reading it from time to time. Oh, should have had a banana skin. Only a stab in the noir, says George McLeod. Ben Whiskey with Molly saying, no idea. He's going with A for 4. Ben Demon Hunter is saying, uh-oh. Ben Demon Hunter, it's always a good idea to follow Ben Whiskey with Molly. That's all I'll say. Everwind is saying, Aquavita, is it required reading in my bathroom? It is required reading in my bathroom. Well, have a copy next to your bed, a copy next to your bathroom, a copy in your backpack. I buy extra copies just to gift to people when they tell me they don't have it. I'm offended. I'm aghast and I gift them it. I can tell you that there were 4 active YouTubers. There was myself, there was Vin No Nonsense Whiskey, there was Jeff from G Whiskey, and there was Liquorhound Chris Trevino in the States. 4 of the 7 were YouTubers. There you go. I'm taking a community 10 for that comment, Aquaviti. You can. You absolutely can. Question 7. Which of these distilleries, oddly, often offers tours despite having no shop or official visitor centre open? So you can book a tour of this distillery, yet there is no visitor centre or shop. I would suggest if you're not going to follow Whiskey with Molly Ben, maybe Billy Abbott, and certainly the master, ninja, Graham Fraser, is in attendance tonight. Visitor centre, nope. Shop, nope. Tours, yes. A, I'm talking about Benriach. B, I'm talking about Benromac. Or C, I'm talking about Ben Nevis. Which of those distilleries can give you a tour despite not having a shop or a visitor centre? Graham Fraser is on a 6 out of 6 tonight. I'm pretty sure Whiskey with Molly is on his 6. Sugar Kitty is in. Good to see you, Sugar Kitty. Hellswood and Dacey Leland switching. That's okay to do. Jimmy Legacy, and I never looked at Graham Fraser and thought ninja, but I will now. There are different takes on ninja, right? Gino Camo is saying A. Pedro, Lachlan, Graham Young, all saying A. We've got a lot of C's here too for Ben Nevis. Lassie, Malt Minion, Chuck, Joe Smith. Whiskey with Molly is saying C. Hellswood is saying C. Whiskey with Molly. Got done on the Islay question. Oh, I caught you out with the Islay one, did I? Apologies. George McLeod, Bruce Bernard, C. James Morgan, C. Peathead, C. Whiskey Total is saying A. This is splitting the crowd, a harder one than I expected. So anybody that's driven through Fort William, through Ben Nevis, will find coach upon coach upon coach visiting Ben Nevis. High footfall there, very big visitor centre, and they will sell you whiskey direct from their shop. Benromac also visitor centre. Benriach do not have a visitor centre or a shop, but they will take pre-arranged tours. And there you can see the floor maltings. That caught out a few of you. Lachlan Mackenzie is still hanging on. Amazing. Well done, Lachlan. Anybody else on a 7 out of 7? Yes, Graham Young is enjoying a 7 out of 7 tonight. Fantastic to see. Peathead is saying, I've been in on all of them and they all have a shop. Well, okay, that might be true. Frank and Benriach might have the ability, much the way that Bunnahavn did in the wee upstairs thing before they had the visitor centre, much the way that Anok, Knockdo Distillery, had a cupboard that they would sell you stuff. But I've been in all of them and they have a shop. Rick Johnson is saying, but you told me to follow Billy Abbott. 5 of 7, I'm sorry. Mark Watt is in as well, playing along tonight. 6 out of 7, but sulking. It's okay to sulk. Listen, sometimes I get the details ever so slightly wrong, and if I do make a mistake, it doesn't even matter if I make a mistake in your favour or not. Just the fact I've made a mistake means that you can take the point. Good to have you in, Mark. Fantastic. All right. Benriach definitely have a shop. Okay. And Billy's on a 4 out of 7 tonight. Billy, you still need a pass mark. Let's see how the last 3 questions are going to go for you. Which of these distilleries features a prominent red chimney? I love the red chimney distilleries. Which of these distilleries has a prominent red chimney? A. Aberfeldy. B. Aberlour. C. Altavania. 2 Speysiders and a Southern Highlander. Which of them has a prominent red chimney? Sid Martin, 7 out of 7. Taking the point, says Frank Peathead. 7 out of 7. Good for you, big guy. Alistair McPhail, 7 out of 7 by process of elimination. by any means, Alistair. Right, Alistair also got his Daftmill delivered today. Did I mention that earlier? Lachlan Mackenzie is guessing. Lassie is going with A. Billy Abbott is saying, Mark, what is your turn? Ben Demon Hunter is saying A, but he's putting in the sheep emoji, suggesting that he's following the crowd. No shame in it at all, Ben. Discordia, good to have you in, Discordia, playing along. No, it's C. Jimmy Leg is saying only by diplomatic means for Alistair. And Alice saying, well, if everyone else is, I'm back at 6 out of 7. Exactly. You're only playing against yourself at this quiz at the end. Ben is saying this is always fun. I can tell you that Altavania, Aberlour, Aberfeldy, they all have big, prominent chimneys. But Altavania and Aberlour are white. Aberfeldy has a prominent red chimney, despite the fact that most of the shots taken of Aberfeldy, for whatever reason, seem to omit the big red chimney. It's just the angle, the more kind of traditional scenes of pagoda roof and old grey brick and things like that seem to omit the red chimney. But if you drive into Aberfeldy, there's a big red chimney, one of the most prominent features there. So if you answered A, you're getting a point. If you said Altavania or Aberlour, they have big, tall, prominent white chimneys. Question 9. It's said by blenders, this is an interesting one. It's said by blenders that due to possibly using the softest water in the industry, this particular distillery's character of fresh oranges is preserved such that even with time and significant age, you can still taste fresh oranges. Which distillery am I talking about? This is lifted directly from the Malt Whisky Yearbook. Utterly fascinating. It made me want to dip into a dram of this distillery's output to see if I got fresh oranges. Maybe I'll do it a wee bit later. Am I talking about A, Oban, B, Glenrothes, or C, Glenkinchie? It's quite an interesting question to me because there's a lot of kind of distilleries out there that are valued by blenders for very specific things. But this distillery, apparently, its superpower was the trait of fresh oranges. And it was said that, and I think there was some scientific analysis went into this, that the reason that not only did it have this fresh orange character, but it was preserved even through aging in cask, it remained for some reason. And it's put down to the fact that it was the water source, super soft water from its spring source. Am I talking about Oban in the Western Highlands, B, Glenrothes and Speyside, or C, Glenkinchie in the Lowlands? You would only get this if you knew this, or if you occasionally read the Malt Whisky Yearbook, especially if it's in the bedside cabinet, the bathroom, the backpack. All over the place for this one, but people either going between A, Oban, or B, Glenrothes. I can tell you that the fresh orange note apparently is attributed to Ben Whiskey with Molly saying I get orange on B, so going with that, Glenrothes. Apparently it's a thing. Got a few Glenrothes on the side. One of my favourite whiskies that have opened this year was that cast strength copper plate Glenrothes, the wee La Bomba bottle, 66% ABV on the vPub. I opened that one. Cracking whiskey. I wonder if it tastes of fresh oranges. Surely Glenmorangie, says Bruce. If only it was an option, eh? That would have been a banana skin right enough. Okay, that's our 9 questions. If we go into the ass hat at the end, is there anybody that's still hanging on with a 9 out of 9 tonight? Give us one. Bugger, says Hillswood. She's on an 8 out of 9, as is Chuck on an 8 out of 9 as well. Well done, Chuck. Fantastic, Helen. 7 out of 9 for Gero Borkman. That's a new name. Nice to have you in. Nice to have you playing the quiz at the end. Discordia is for 0 of 8. It can't be that bad, Discordia. Come on. A multiple choice. Thanks for playing along, even if it is Ginger Genius. John is on a 7. Joe Smith's got a pass mark on a 5. Clitzed on an 8. Big Ed on a 7. Got me 8 out of 9 for Graham Young. Okay, there's been enough bananaskins to trip up most people tonight. Then it looks like that we have a lot of attrition tonight. 8 out of 9 for Sugar Kitty, Daisy Leland, Dave the Brave. 7 for Bruce. Billy Abbott, St. Aubin Distillery smells of oranges, but never tried an old enough one. Graham Fraser and Sid Martin are holding it together on 9 out of 9. So we do have 3 people putting a bid in. Alistair McPhail joins the fray with 9 out of 9 as well. So we've got Sid, Alistair and Graham Fraser going into the asshat at the end, hoping for a 10 out of 10. Exactly how it should be, that some make it through, but it's going to be tough. Sandro is suggesting a tough quiz. He needs the asshat for his pass mark tonight. Good luck to you for it. Sandro, let's see how we go on. And Mark Watt is saying 8 out of 9, but a moral 9. Take the 9. Take the moral 9, Mark. Take it. The asshat at the end is an asshat. How many distilleries in total have featured a flora and fauna release? I'm including the 1997 cast strength releases in this, so all flora and fauna over the time of its existence. How many distilleries in total have had an official flora and fauna release? Is it about the same number as A, the number of years that Ardbeg 10 official bottling has now been out in circulation? Is it about the same number as B, years of operation at Arran, Lochranza Distillery? Or is it C, about the same number as years of whiskey bottled in 70 CL size? So that is the amount of years since the EU homogenization of whiskey bottling kicked in. So how many years have we enjoyed 70 CL as opposed to 750 CL that was before that? Or sorry, 75 CL before that, 750 ml. So is it A, the amount of years that Ardbeg 10 has been around, B, the amount of years of operation of Lochranza on Arran, or C, the amount of years that we've enjoyed 70 CL as opposed to 75 CL? That is your deliberately obtuse asshat question at the end. I'm asking you how many different flora and fauna releases have ever been released. And by releases, I'm not talking about individual bottles. I'm talking about distilleries, specifically distilleries. So let's imagine that Blair Athol had a cast strength release and a standard flora and fauna release. I'm still only counting that as 1, just to be clear. Discordia is spot on. No one enjoys the 70 CL. That was tongue-in-cheek when I said that. Enjoying the EU homogenization of a couple of drams less in the bottle, right? Clitzt, I really only know half of one answer. Either the beauty or the ugliness of the asshat, right, Clitzt? RW's bought me another dram right at the end. Just blown me a wee kiss by the looks of things. Thank you very much, RW. I still don't know what your actual name is. Going to raise this wee glass to say thank you for your generosity tonight and participating. Cheers to you. All right, what do we have? Flora and fauna releases. I can tell you that the 3 answers that we have: years of Ardbeg 10-year-old official bottling. That's been out there for, believe it or not, since the year 2000. We are now in the 26th year of there being Ardbeg 10 on the market. Years of operation at Arran, Lochranza, well, that was to 1995. We're now in the 31st year. 30 years Arran has been going. C, years that whiskey's been bottled in 70 CL, 33 years since the EU homogenization kicked in as law. As Jimmy Legg gifts 5 Aquaviti memberships out to 5 random barflies. Thank you, Jimmy, for your generosity and your support of me. I don't know if that helps you, but the number of flora and fauna releases, I can tell you, official flora and fauna releases is 26. If you add the cast strength releases in there, it remains 26. There was no extra releases from other distilleries that didn't otherwise have a flora and fauna release when the cask strength came out. They were already existing flora and fauna releases. 26 is a total. There are 11 available today still. A lot of attrition along the years, either by being promoted to extended malts, extended classic malts, or sold on, such as Royal Brackla and Altmore and all of these things. But the answer was A, 26. How many of you held on for a 10 out of 10 at the end? Lachlan celebrating a 9. Fantastic score, Lachlan. Taking it, says Whiskey with Molly Ben, with a fantastic 8 out of 10, along with John, Ginger Genius, Chuck Malt Minion on an 8. If you stay till the end of this quiz, you deserve something. Jimmy. Big Ed, good to see you, Big Ed, on a 7 out of 10. Graham Fraser, 9 out of 10. Well. 8 out of 10, happy with that. Klitzt, 8 out of 10 for Ben Demon Hunter. Has the attrition been so? Pedro's saying 9 out of 10, no 10 out of 10 again, but still much better than I did at school. This is the right school to be at, right, Pedro? I will not be disclosing my score, says Billy Abbott, as is your absolute privilege. Nice to have you playing along, Billy, however you got on with the score tonight. If you do have to keep your score secret, it's very much my problem and fault and not yours. Ben is on an 8 out of 10. Klitzt on a 9 out of 10. Hillswith on an 8. Graham Fraser on a 9, as I mentioned. Fantastic. Alistair, even Alistair's on a 9 out of 10. So that means that Sid Martin's on a 9 out of 10 as well. I managed to wipe out everyone tonight. It's reminiscent of the quiz at the end of old, isn't it? Petehead is saying, because it's Sugar Kitty's birthday, I take the point. Listen, if it's Sugar Kitty's birthday, how could I have missed that? Let's raise a wee glass. In fact, I'm going to have a wee dram of my favourite tonight. And that's this wee potent, very loud and shouty, but nevertheless compelling Ardnamurchan Nichols and Perks 5-year-old from a PX cask. To my pal that I haven't met yet, to my moderator, somebody that's been around for a long time, celebrating a birthday, Sugar Kitty, my friend. How are you, big guy? I hope you're doing well. Many happy returns to you. Cheers. Thanks for pointing it out, Frank. Thanks, Petehead. Danny Hebington is saying 6 out of 10. Bloody well played, Mr. Duff. You got that quiz absolutely in the mark of difficulty. No intention. I tried to pitch it somewhere in the middle. Just the way that it falls, it's really difficult to do. I like you, Roy, mostly, says Jimmy Legg. I love you too, big guy. Fab fun vPub this evening, Roy. Cheers, Hellswood says. Malt Minion is saying, loved my trip to Scotland and meeting so many of you Aquavitae. It was a pleasure to have you there, Chuck, and I genuinely hope it's not the last time, buddy. Ginger Genius is saying, great vPub after a crap week. Just what I needed. John, that's sometimes how I feel too. Means a lot. Gino Kimo is saying, have a great weekend, buddy. Thank you so much for joining us. Jimmy Legg is celebrating with some Aquavitae emoji and that's that emoji as well. So there we go. We've kind of covered our our Peatfest for 2025. It's going to be very easy to bring these annually because peat is just everywhere in whiskey. It's constantly. I could easily do Highland for year after year after year. I could bring in the Lowlands easily. I could go into Speyside even and the islands I haven't touched. Just think how much fun we could have talking about peat down in Campbelltown and all of that just within Scotland. I love it. We just need to dedicate one vPub a year, just to ring fence one wee session just before the warmer weather kicks in every springtime to celebrate the wonder that is peat and peaty flavours and peaty influence and the complexity of peat and its influence in Scotch whisky. I've enjoyed it again tonight, but honestly, more than anything, and I hope you've worked this out, I just like hanging out with you guys on a Thursday night. Rick Johnson is saying, when do we get Peter Lee icon? Oh, well, Gregor has to make it so that we can see it. The fishing rod makes him shrink down so much in a tiny little square I've got to fit it in. So I guess when he's holding a fish instead of a fishing rod. Dave the Brave is saying, thanks for tonight. Great theme. Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Pedro is saying, great vPub as always. Until next week, Barflies and Aquavita hanging out with you as always makes my week better. Cheers. Pedro in Brazil, thank you so much, buddy. I'm looking forward to the next time we raise a glass. Lachlan is saying, thanks, Roy and folks. Have a good evening. A good evening to you, Lachlan. And Peter is saying, with that, I'm calling it a day. And I'm going to hit the sack. May Peatfest continue. Thank you for organising Aquavita. And all of you, see you next time. Slanchiva. Chris Everland is saying, rumour has it, if you scratch Jimmy Leg Aquavita, you'll get a Campbelltown peat smell. Let's not scratch Jimmy Leg. Alice saying, everyone, thanks for a great evening. Thank you, buddy. Thank you so much. And Whiskey with Molly saying, can we have a Peat vPub? Jeff Whisky and Peter Lee as guests. That's a good idea. Pete with a P-E-T-E as a P-E as opposed to a P-E-A-T. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me tonight. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed getting my peaty fix on before we kick into the warmer months. I say warmer, of course, for all of you that live outside of Scotland, right? Regardless, I've had a very nice Thursday night again, as always. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you a week from tonight for another vPub session. But in the meantime, I'll raise this glass to remind you all that you're very dearly loved. And until then, Slanchiva. Cheers, everyone.